Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Did you notice how everything suddenly fell silent just before something happened? Not a peaceful silence, an ominous silence. A silence that makes your hair stand on end, even when surrounded by nothing but endless fields. The silence Luke Harwell heard that night was exactly like that. The date was August 14th, 2019. Luke remembers this date because it was 2 days before his 43rd birthday, and he had planned to take the day off for the first time in 6 years. He ran a 340-acre cornfield outside Hays, Kansas, in a place where the prairies began to flatten out and you could see weather systems coming from 30 miles away. Luke had been farming that land since his daddy passed in 2003. He knew every inch of those fields, knew which plots drained poorly after rain, knew where the soil ran a little more clay than loam, knew the sound his John Deere 6145M made when it was running right and when something was fixing to go wrong. That night, something went very, very wrong. Luke had headed out around 10:30 p.m. to check the irrigation system on the North 40. It hadn't been running right all week, and he'd finally gotten the replacement part from town that afternoon. He figured he'd swap it out under the tractor's work lights, have it done in an hour, and be back in bed before midnight. The moon was 3/4 full, hanging low and yellow over the fields. Good visibility. The corn was nearly ready for harvest, standing about 7 feet tall and rustling in the warm breeze that came steady from the southwest. Luke had his radio tuned to the country station out of Salina, windows down, just enjoying the night despite the work ahead. He was about half a mile from the house, driving the access road that ran between two of his largest plots, when the tractor's lights flickered. Not a big deal. Maybe a loose connection. Luke reached down to tap the housing like he'd done 100 times before. The lights flickered again. Then they went out completely. The radio died at the same instant. Even the dashboard lights went dark. The engine kept running, though, which was strange. Luke had seen plenty of electrical failures in his years, but never one that killed the lights and radio while leaving the engine going strong. He eased off the throttle, letting the tractor slow to a crawl. That's when he noticed the quiet. The wind had stopped. Now, if you've never spent time in the Kansas plains, you might not understand how wrong that is. The wind doesn't stop. It might calm down to a whisper, might pick up to a roar, but it doesn't just stop. The air doesn't go dead still like someone threw a switch. But that's exactly what happened. Luke brought the tractor to a complete stop and killed the engine. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like pressure against his eardrums. No wind, no insects, no distant highway traffic. Nothing. Then he saw the light. At first, he thought it was another tractor, maybe his neighbor Tom Rodriguez checking his own fields. But the light was wrong. It wasn't the yellowish halogen of work lights. It was pure white, almost blue-white, and it was moving. The light was coming from beyond the corn in the eastern plot, maybe 200 yards out. It was moving slowly, steadily, parallel to where Luke sat. He could see it through the gaps between the stalks, a bright point that seemed to glide just above the crop line. Luke's first thought was helicopter, maybe the county sheriff doing a search. But there was no sound, no thump of rotors, no engine noise at all. His second thought was drone. Rich kids from town sometimes flew them out over the farms, though usually during the day. But this light was too bright, too large, and moving too smoothly. Luke sat, frozen, in the tractor seat, watching the light move. It traveled about 50 yards, then stopped. The glow intensified, growing brighter and brighter until Luke had to squint. The light was so intense it started casting shadows through the corn, making the stalks look like dark fingers reaching toward him. Then, just as suddenly as it had brightened, the light went out. Complete darkness. Luke's eyes, adjusted to the glow, could see nothing but after images. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision. That's when his cell phone rang. The sound was so loud in the silence that Luke actually jumped. He fumbled the phone out of his pocket, nearly dropping it. The screen showed an incoming call from Sierra Graham, his girlfriend of 8 months. Sierra worked dispatch for the Ellis County Sheriff's Department and had the night shift this week. "Luke?" Her voice was tight with concern. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" "I got a weird call about 90 seconds ago. Mrs. Patterson out on County Road 18 said she saw strange lights over your property. Said they were too bright to be normal. You seeing anything?" Luke looked back toward where the light had been. Nothing but darkness and corn. Yeah, I saw something. Some kind of light in the east field. It's gone now." "Was it a helicopter? Search and rescue?" "No engine sound. No sound at all." There was a pause on the other end. "Luke, I'm going to send a deputy out your way, just to check things out." "Sierra, I don't think... I'm sending someone. Stay put." She hung up before he could argue. Luke sat in the dark, gripping the phone. His eyes had finally adjusted enough to make out shapes again. The corn swayed gently in a breeze that had just started back up, as if the wind had simply been holding its breath and was now exhaling. Luke tried to restart the tractor. Nothing. He turned the key again. The engine turned over sluggishly but wouldn't catch. He tried the lights. Dead. "Come on," he muttered, trying the ignition again. This time, the engine caught, coughing to life. The lights flicked on, bright and normal. The radio blared back to life mid-song, making Luke jump again. He quickly turned it down. Everything was working. Like nothing had happened. Luke sat there for a long moment, engine idling, trying to make sense of it. Equipment failure, sure. That happened, but the timing, the light in the field, the complete silence. He looked toward the eastern plot again. The corn was just corn, standing tall and ready for harvest. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place, except... Luke narrowed his eyes. There was something different about a section of the field, maybe 50 yards in from the access road. The way the moonlight hit it was wrong. The corn there looked darker, flatter. He'd just started to open the tractor door to investigate when headlights appeared on the access road behind him. A white Ford Explorer with county markings rolled up, and Deputy Mitchell Reeves climbed out. Reeves was young, maybe 26, but Luke had always found him to be solid and professional. "Evening, Luke," Reeves called out, flashlight in hand. "Sierra said you might be having some trouble out here." "Hey, Mitch, I'm not sure trouble is the right word." Luke climbed down from the tractor. "Equipment failure, maybe. And I saw some kind of light." "What kind of light?" Luke told him. Reeves listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When Luke finished, the deputy nodded slowly. "Mrs. Patterson said it was over this area. Said it was bright enough she thought maybe there'd been an accident, that someone had rolled a vehicle." Reeves swept his flashlight across the cornfield. "You said the light was in there?" "Yeah, about 200 yards in, moving north to south." "Let's take a look." They walked to the edge of the field. The corn stood in neat rows, exactly as it should. Luke's operation was precise, his planting patterns consistent. The stalks were healthy and thick, their leaves rustling in the restored breeze. But there, about 50 yards in, Something was definitely wrong. "You see that?" Luke pointed. Reeves aimed his flashlight. The beam played across the corn, then stopped. Yeah, I see it." A section of corn, maybe 20 feet in diameter, was bent over. Not broken, not trampled. Bent. The stalks were folded at nearly 90-degree angles about 3 feet up from the ground, all leaning in the same direction, forming a clockwise spiral pattern that led to a clear center point. "What the hell?" Reeves moved forward, pushing into the corn. Luke followed. As they got closer, the pattern became even more obvious. The corn was laid down in a perfect spiral, the stalks bent but not damaged. The leaves were still green and healthy. The ears of corn were intact. They reached the center of the pattern. The ground was hard-packed dirt, exactly as it should be this late in the season. No tracks, no disturbance, no signs that anyone or anything had walked through here. "This is," Reeves trailed off, turning in a slow circle. His flashlight beam traced the spiral. "Luke, you do this?" "Why the hell would I do this? That's lost yield, Mitch." "I'm not accusing you, I've never seen anything like it." "Neither have I." Reeves knelt down, examining the bent stalks more closely. "Look at this. The stalks are bent right at the node, not broken, not cracked, just bent, like someone heated them and bent them over." Luke crouched beside him. Reeves was right. The corn stalks were flexed at the natural joint, folded over cleanly. No splitting. No damage to the cellular structure that he could see. "And look at the ground," Reeves continued. "No footprints. No tire tracks. If someone came in here to do this, there should be some kind of trail. The ground's too hard for prints. Maybe. But come on, Luke. To bend this much corn, you'd have to walk through here, at least disturb some of the stalks that aren't part of the pattern." Luke stood up, looking around. The deputy was right. The corn outside the pattern was perfectly normal, perfectly straight. There was no path leading to this spot. No evidence of entry at all. "What about the light you saw?" Reeves asked. "Could it have been someone with a really bright flashlight? Or one of those LED work lights? Moving 50 yards in a few seconds, at a steady pace with no sound?" Reeves had no answer for that. They stood there in the center of the spiral, surrounded by bent corn, and said nothing for a long minute. The breeze picked up a bit, causing the stalks to rustle and sway. The sound was normally comforting to Luke, the sound of healthy crops doing well. Tonight it sounded ominous. "I should document this," Reeves finally said. He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. The camera flash strobed through the corn, making shadows dance. "You think Sierra needs to see this?" Luke asked. "She's going to want to know what we found, but—" Reeves hesitated. "What exactly are we going to tell her we found? Some bent corn and no explanation for it? And the light, don't forget the light." "Right, the light." Reeves took a few more pictures, then turned to Luke. "Look, I'm going to file a report. Unusual incident, unknown cause. That's about all I can do. Unless you want me to call someone else, state police? Maybe someone from K-State who studies crops?" Luke thought about it. The idea of calling in more people, having them tramp through his fields asking questions, treating his farm like some kind of crime scene or science experiment, that didn't sit right. "Let's wait on that," he said. "I'll check the field in daylight, see if there's anything else weird. Maybe there's a simple explanation." Reeves looked doubtful but nodded. "All right, but if you find anything else, you call me immediately. And Luke, be careful out here tonight." "What do you mean?" The deputy swept his flashlight across the spiral one more time. "I mean, something did this, and we don't know what." They made their way back out of the corn in silence. Reeves took a few more pictures from the edge of the field, then returned to his Explorer. "I'll have Sierra check in with you in the morning," he said through his open window. "And Luke, maybe don't come back out here alone tonight, just in case." "In case of what?" Reeves shrugged. "I don't know, that's what worries me." The deputy drove off, his taillights disappearing down the access road. Luke watched him go, then turned back to look at his field. From this angle, you couldn't see the pattern at all. Just row after row of healthy corn ready for harvest. Luke's phone buzzed. A text from Sierra. "Mitch filled me in. You okay?" "Fine," he typed back. "Just confused. Stay out of those fields tonight, please." "Wasn't planning on going back in." "Good. Call me when you get home." Luke pocketed his phone and climbed back into the tractor. The engine started normally, lights working perfectly, as if the last hour hadn't happened. He decided to skip the irrigation repair. That could wait until morning. Right now, he just wanted to be back at the house. Luke turned the tractor around and started back down the access road. He kept glancing at the eastern field, half expecting to see that light again, but there was nothing. Just corn and moonlight and the restored night sounds of Kansas farmland. He was halfway home when he noticed the smell. It was faint at first, just a hint of something that didn't belong. Ozone, maybe? Like the smell after a lightning strike. Or burnt electrical wiring. Luke sniffed the air, trying to place it. The smell grew stronger as he approached his barn. By the time he parked the tractor, it was unmistakable. Something had burned. Not wood or crop, something else. Something chemical. Luke killed the engine and climbed down. The smell was coming from the eastern side of the barn, the side that faced the field where he'd found the spiral. He grabbed a flashlight from his toolbox and walked around the building. The grass along the barn's foundation was singed. Not burned, not charred. Singed, like someone had waved a heat source over it. The grass wasn't destroyed, just browned. Dead. And the pattern was strange. It ran in a straight line along the barn for about 15 feet, maybe 3 inches wide. Luke knelt down and touched the grass. It crumbled under his fingers, dry and brittle. He aimed his flashlight along the line, following it. The singed grass extended past the barn, across his gravel drive, and into the lawn that separated his house from the outbuildings. He followed it. The line ran straight as an arrow, heading directly toward his house. It crossed the lawn, passed within 2 feet of his front porch, and continued into his yard. Luke tracked it all the way to his fence line, where it abruptly ended. Just stopped, like someone had drawn a line with a marker and simply stopped drawing. Luke stood at the fence, flashlight aimed at the ground, trying to understand what he was looking at. The line was too straight to be natural, too precise. But what could cause grass to die in such a specific pattern? What could create that kind of heat without leaving scorch marks? His phone rang again. Sierra. "Hey," he answered. "You're home?" "Yeah, just parked the tractor." "Good. Listen, I've been thinking about what Mitch told me, about the spiral in your corn." She paused. "Have you ever heard of crop circles? Like the ones in England? The hoaxes. Some are hoaxes, but not all of them. I did some reading after Mitch's call. Luke, there are documented cases where crop circles have appeared in fields with no signs of entry, where the plants are bent but not broken, where people report seeing lights beforehand. Luke looked back at the line of dead grass, then out toward the dark shape of his eastern field. "Sierra, I found something else." He told her about the grass, about the perfect straight line, about the smell of ozone and burnt chemicals. "Luke, you need to leave, right now. Come into town. Stay with me tonight. I can't just abandon my property." "Yes, you can. Whatever happened in that field, it might not be done. Please. Just for tonight. Luke wanted to argue. Wanted to say he wasn't afraid of some bent corn and dead grass. But standing there in the dark, flashlight beam showing him that impossible line, he realized he was afraid. More afraid than he'd been in years. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll pack a bag and head your way. Thank you. Drive safe. And Luke?" "Yeah?" "Don't go back into that field. Not tonight, not alone." "I won't." He hung up and started toward the house, but something made him stop. Made him turn around and look back at his fields one more time. And that's when he saw it again. The light. But this time it wasn't moving through the corn. It was rising above it. Rising up into the sky like a balloon released from a child's hand. It climbed slowly, steadily, that same intense blue-white glow. Luke watched, transfixed, as it rose higher and higher. When it reached maybe 300 feet up, it stopped, just hung there in the air, pulsing slightly, like a star that had descended too close to Earth. Then it moved, not drifted, not floated. It moved with purpose, with direction, cutting across the sky at a speed that no helicopter, no plane, no drone could match. It was there above his field, and then it was a mile away, and then it was just a point of light on the horizon. Then it was gone. Luke stood in his driveway, heart pounding, watching the empty sky. 5 seconds, maybe 10. That's how long the whole thing had lasted. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called Sierra back. "Did you see it?" he asked without preamble. "The light. Did anyone call it in?" "What light? Luke, what's happening?" "It was just here, over my field. It went straight up then. It just took off, faster than anything I've ever seen." "Luke, get in your truck right now. Get out of there." I'm going. He ran to his Ford F-250, fumbling with his keys. The truck started normally, thank God. Luke threw it in gear and headed down his long driveway toward the county road. He didn't look back. But if he had, he might have seen the faint glow that had appeared again in the eastern field. Might have seen it pulsing, brightening, like something preparing to return. Instead, Luke drove into town, hands gripping the wheel, trying to convince himself that there was a rational explanation for everything he'd seen, trying and failing. Because deep down, in a place that was more instinct than logic, Luke Harwell knew the truth. Something had been in his field tonight. Something had created that spiral, that line of dead grass, those moments of impossible silence. And whatever it was, it might come back. Sierra was waiting on the front steps of her apartment building when Luke pulled up. She ran to his truck before he'd even killed the engine, yanked the door open, and pulled him into a hug. "Jesus, Luke, I was so worried." He held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, using it to anchor himself to something normal and real. After a moment, they separated. "Come on," Sierra said. "Let's get inside." Her apartment was small but comfortable. 3rd floor, 1 bedroom, with a view of downtown Hayes' modest skyline. Luke had spent plenty of nights here over the past 8 months, but tonight it felt different. Safer, somehow, like the walls could protect him from whatever was lurking in his fields. Sierra made coffee while Luke sat at her small kitchen table, staring at nothing. His hands were still shaking slightly. "Here," she set a mug in front of him. "Drink this, then tell me everything. From the beginning." So he did. He told her about the tractor dying, about the silence, about the light moving through the corn. He told her about the spiral Mitch had found, about the line of dead grass, about the light rising into the sky and disappearing faster than anything he'd ever seen. Sierra listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "My mom used to tell me stories," she finally said, "about her cousin Roberta. This was back in the 70s up near Norton. Roberta worked at the grain elevator, and one night she was driving home late. She saw lights over a wheat field. Bright lights, moving in ways that didn't make sense. She stopped her car to watch, and the next thing she knew, 3 hours had passed, just gone. She was still sitting in her car on the same road, but it was 3 hours later. 3 hours? She had no memory of what happened, no explanation, but she said she felt different afterwards, like something had changed inside her. She wouldn't talk about it much, but sometimes late at night she'd say things about how we're not alone, about how they've always been here watching. Luke wrapped his hands around the warm mug. You think that's what this is? UFOs? Aliens? I don't know what to think. But Luke, whatever explanation we come up with, it has to account for what you saw. The light moving that fast. The corn bent with no tracks, the dead grass in a perfectly straight line. She reached across the table and took his hand. Something happened in your field tonight, something we can't explain. I should call someone. The Air Force, maybe? Don't they investigate this kind of thing? Project Blue Book shut down in 1969. Officially, the government says they don't investigate UFOs anymore. Officially? Yeah. Sierra squeezed his hand. Get some sleep. In the morning, we'll go back out there together and take another look. Maybe we missed something. Maybe there's an explanation we didn't think of. Luke wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that daylight would make everything clear and reasonable. But he'd seen that light. Seen it move in ways that defied every law of physics he understood. He slept on Sierra's couch that night, or at least tried to. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that spiral of bent corn, saw that light rising into the sky, saw patterns and possibilities that didn't make sense. At some point near dawn, he finally drifted off. When he woke, it was past 9 a.m. Sierra was already up, dressed in jeans and a work shirt instead of her uniform. She'd called in and taken a personal day. Come on, she said. Let's go look at your field while there's plenty of sunlight. They took Luke's truck. The drive back to his farm felt longer than usual, even though it was only 15 minutes from Sierra's apartment. Luke found himself gripping the wheel tighter as they got closer, his eyes scanning the fields they passed. Everything looked normal. Corn and soybeans, wheat stubble and prairie grass. Tractors working distant fields. A normal August morning in rural Kansas, until they turned onto Luke's property. Oh my God, Sierra whispered. The line of dead grass was more visible in daylight. Much more visible. It cut across Luke's lawn like a scar, that same 3-inch width running in a perfect straight line from the fence toward his house. But that wasn't what made Sierra gasp. There were more lines. 3 of them running parallel to the first, all spaced exactly the same distance apart. Luke hadn't seen them in the dark, but in daylight they were obvious. 4 perfectly straight lines of dead grass, like runway markings, all pointing toward his eastern field. Luke, Sierra said slowly, those weren't there before, right? You would have noticed? I mow this lawn every week. There was nothing. He pulled the truck to a stop and they got out. The grass wasn't just dead, it was ash. When Sierra bent down to touch it, it disintegrated under her fingers, leaving a gray powder. This is radiation, she said suddenly, or intense heat. Something burned this grass down to the cellular level. How do you know that? I took biology in college. This isn't normal decay. This is destruction. They followed the lines to the fence, where they ended just as abruptly as before. Sierra pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. We need to document everything, she said. Every detail, before anyone can say we're making this up. They walked to the barn next, where Luke showed her the original line he'd found last night. More pictures. Then they stood looking out at the eastern field, where somewhere in those rows of corn, a perfect spiral waited. "We need to go back in there," Sierra said. "See if anything's changed." Luke didn't want to. Every instinct told him to stay out of that field, to leave whatever had happened there alone. But Sierra was right. They needed to know. They pushed into the corn, following the same path Mitch had taken last night. The stalks were tall and thick, closing around them. The sun was high now, but somehow the field seemed darker than it should be. Cooler. "You feel that?" Sierra asked. "Yeah, temperature drop." They were only 30 yards in, but it felt like they'd entered a different climate zone. The air was noticeably colder, maybe 10 degrees. And that smell was back. Ozone and chemicals and something else Luke couldn't identify. Something organic, almost. They found the spiral. In daylight, it was even more impressive. The pattern was perfect, the bend in the stalk's uniform and precise. 20 feet in diameter, every stalk folded at exactly the same angle, creating a clockwise spiral that drew the eye to the center. "This is impossible," Sierra breathed. "This would take hours to create, and you'd leave tracks. You'd damage some of the plants." She walked around the edge, examining every detail. "Luke, this is beyond anything I've ever seen." They moved to the center. The ground was still hard-packed, still showed no signs of disturbance, but there was something new. A mark. Right in the center of the spiral, pressed into the hard earth, was a circular impression about 6 inches in diameter. It was too perfect to be natural, too precise to be accidental. Sierra knelt beside it, pulling out her phone to get close-up shots. "It's like something pressed down here, something round and heavy." Luke crouched next to her. The impression was maybe an inch deep, its edges sharp and clean. And around it, in a perfect circle, the dirt had a strange quality. It was darker, almost glassy, like it had been subjected to intense heat. "Sierra, what if something landed here?" She looked up at him, her brown eyes wide. "Like what?" "You know what." They stared at each other for a long moment. Neither wanted to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real. Sierra's phone rang, making them both jump. She answered it, listened for a moment, then her expression changed. "When? Are you sure?" "Okay. Yeah, we'll be there." She hung up and looked at Luke. "That was Mitch. He wants us to meet him at Tom Rodriguez's farm. Tom just called in a report." "What kind of report?" "The same kind as yours. Strange lights, equipment failure, and a circle in his wheat field." Tom Rodriguez's farm was 3 miles east of Luke's place. Tom and his wife Maria had been working that land for 20 years, raising wheat and cattle. Luke knew them well, had helped Tom fix a combine last harvest season. Tom was standing in his driveway when they arrived, Mitch's patrol car already parked behind his pickup. The older man looked shaken, his normally steady hands trembling slightly as he gestured toward his north field. "It was about 3 this morning," Tom was telling Mitch. "I got up to use the bathroom, looked out the window, and saw lights. Just like Luke described, moving over my wheat." "Did you go investigate?" Mitch asked. "Hell no. After what you told me about Luke's place, I stayed inside. But this morning, when I went out to check on the cattle..." Tom trailed off, shaking his head. "You need to see it." They all piled into Tom's truck and drove out to the north field. The wheat had already been harvested here, leaving just stubble and a few volunteer plants. But in the middle of the field, clearly visible from a distance, was a pattern. This one wasn't a spiral. It was more complex. 3 circles, connected by straight lines forming a triangular arrangement. And in the center of each circle, the stubble was flattened in a clockwise pattern. "Jesus Christ," Luke muttered. They parked at the field's edge and walked in. The pattern was huge, maybe 40 feet from one circle to another, and like Luke's spiral, there were no tracks, no signs of how anyone could have created this without leaving evidence. Mitch was taking pictures and measurements, his face set in grim concentration. "Tom, you said your equipment failed too? Truck wouldn't start this morning. Had to jump it. And look at this." Tom led them to his barn. The electronic door opener was dead. The lights inside wouldn't turn on. And his cattle, normally docile and curious, were huddled together in the far corner of their pen, refusing to approach the fence. "Animals know," Maria Rodriguez said quietly. She joined them, her arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. "They can sense things we can't, and they're terrified." Sierra pulled Luke aside. "This isn't just you. Whatever happened last night, it happened here too. Maybe other places. We need to check," Luke said. "See if anyone else reported anything." Mitch overheard. "I already did. After Tom's call, I went through last night's logs. Mrs. Patterson's call about lights over your place was the only one. But that doesn't mean other people didn't see something. Not everyone calls 911 for strange lights." "What about radar?" Sierra asked. "The airport in Hayes, or maybe the Air Force Base in Salina. Wouldn't they track something in the sky?" "Depends on what it was," Mitch said, "and whether they'd tell us if they did." They spent another hour at Tom's farm, documenting everything. The patterns in the wheat, the electrical failures, the frightened cattle. By the time they left, it was past noon. Luke drove back toward his farm with Sierra beside him, both lost in thought. They were almost there when Sierra suddenly grabbed his arm. "Stop the truck." "What?" "Stop, look." Luke hit the brakes and looked where she was pointing. In the field they were passing, another farmer's land, he saw it. Another pattern. This one was in soybeans, a double spiral, two interlocking curves that formed a yin-yang shape. Even from the road, they could see it was perfectly formed, the plants bent but not broken. "How many?" Luke asked quietly. "How many of these are there?" They counted 5 more before they got back to Luke's place. 5 more patterns in 5 different fields, all within a 6-mile radius, and those were just the ones visible from the road. Back at Luke's farm, they found something else waiting for them. A car was parked in Luke's driveway, a dark sedan with government plates, and standing next to it, examining the lines of dead grass, was a man in a dark suit. Luke's heart sank. Sierra grabbed his hand. The man looked up as they approached. He was maybe 50, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He held up credentials. "Mr. Harwell, I'm Special Agent David Morrison, Air Force, Office of Special Investigations. I'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened here last night." They sat at Luke's kitchen table, the same table where Luke had eaten breakfast with his father 20 years ago, where he'd signed the deed transfer papers after the funeral, where he'd shared countless meals and plans and dreams. Now it was covered with photographs and incident reports while a federal agent asked questions about lights in the sky. Agent Morrison was professional and thorough. He took notes on a tablet, occasionally asking Luke to repeat details or clarify timings. He'd already interviewed Tom Rodriguez and had apparently spoken with Mitch Reeves as well. "You understand why I'm here," Morrison said. It wasn't a question. Multiple reports, same night, consistent details, lights, electrical failures, physical evidence. That's a pattern we take seriously. "The Air Force investigates this stuff?" Luke asked. "I thought that stopped decades ago." Project Blue Book concluded that most UFO reports had conventional explanations. That didn't mean we stopped paying attention. Morrison tapped his tablet. "Mr. Harwell, I'm going to be direct with you. What happened in these fields last night wasn't conventional. The patterns, the precision, the lack of physical evidence of entry, we've seen this before. Sierra leaned forward. Where? When? Morrison studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. England, Netherlands, Canada, Australia, Germany, all over the world really. Crop formations appearing overnight with no explanation. Most are hoaxes, maybe 90%. But some, he paused, some defy explanation, like yours. What causes them? Luke asked. We don't know. Leading theories include atmospheric phenomena, electromagnetic effects, directed energy beams. Some people believe they're messages. Others think they're navigation markers. Messages from what? Morrison closed his tablet. That's above my pay grade, Mr. Harwell. What I can tell you is this. The patterns in your fields match signatures we've documented elsewhere. The bent but not broken plants, the node alterations, the lack of tracks, the electromagnetic interference with your equipment. All consistent with other verified cases. Verified? Sierra said. So you're admitting these things are real? I'm admitting that something real created them. Whether that something is weather, technology, or, Morrison shrugged. Like I said, above my pay grade. He stood up, collecting his materials. I'm going to send a team out to take samples. Soil, plant material, radiation readings. We'll try to do minimal damage to your crops, Mr. Harwell. In the meantime, I'd advise you to stay out of the affected areas. If there's residual radiation or chemical contamination, you don't want exposure. What about the lights? Luke asked. If they come back? If you see anything unusual, call local law enforcement immediately. They'll contact us. Morrison handed Luke a card. And Mr. Harwell, don't talk to the media about this. The last thing you need is your property overrun with UFO hunters and conspiracy theorists. After Morrison left, Luke and Sierra sat in silence for several minutes. They know something, Sierra finally said. Did you see his face when you described the light? He knew exactly what you were talking about. He's seen it before. Or read about it. Luke, the government doesn't send Air Force investigators for weather phenomena. They sent him because they think this is something else. Like what, aliens? Luke said the word with frustration, almost anger. Sierra, I'm a farmer. I deal with soil and seed and weather. I don't deal with whatever this is. None of us do. But it's happening anyway. Luke's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and groaned. His sister Beth calling from Topeka. He'd texted her last night to let her know he was staying in town, but he hadn't explained why. Hey, Beth. Luke, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from Jenny Morrison. She said her husband Tom found some kind of crop circle in his wheat field, and that you had one too? Is this a joke? News traveled fast in rural Kansas. Luke explained what had happened, leaving out some of the more bizarre details. Beth listened, then said something that surprised him. You need to call Professor Dennis Yates. Who? He teaches at K-State, agricultural sciences, but he also researches crop formations, has for years. Dad knew him, actually. They talked about this stuff sometimes. Dad? Luke sat up straighter. Dad talked about crop circles? Not circles, exactly, but weird things in fields. Dad saw something once, out on the back 40 of the old property. Never talked about it much, but I remember him mentioning it to Mom. He said there were things we didn't understand about the land, about what might be out there. Luke felt something cold settle in his chest. When was this? I was maybe 10, so early 90s. Dad was different after that summer, more watchful. like he was always looking at the sky. After promising to call Beth later, Luke hung up and immediately searched for Dennis Yates online. Sierra read over his shoulder. "He's published papers on crop formations," she said, pointing to the search results. "Real scientific papers, not fringe stuff. Electromagnetic studies, plant analysis, statistical models." Luke found a phone number for the university and called. After navigating through 2 departments and leaving a message, he was surprised when his phone rang 15 minutes later. "Mr. Harwell, this is Dennis Yates. You left a message about formations in your fields." Luke explained everything. Yates listened without interrupting, and when Luke finished, there was a long pause. "I need to come see this," Yates said. "Today, if possible." "What you're describing?" "Mr. Harwell, I've been studying this phenomenon for 30 years. If your formations match the patterns you've described, they may be among the most significant documented cases in the continental United States." "Significant how?" "Because they're not hoaxes. Because they demonstrate characteristics that we cannot reproduce with current technology. And because, if the pattern I think you're describing is correct, they may be part of a larger communication." "Communication with who?" Another pause. "I'll explain when I get there. I can be at your farm by 6 p.m. Will that work?" It would have to work. Luke gave him directions and hung up. "Communication," Sierra said softly. "Luke, what if that's what this is? What if something is trying to talk to us?" Before Luke could answer, they heard a vehicle approaching. Looking out the window, they saw a white van with K-State markings pulling into the driveway. Agent Morrison's team had arrived. The next several hours were a blur of activity. Scientists in protective suits took samples from the spiral, from the dead grass lines, from the soil around the impression in the center. They used radiation detectors, electromagnetic field readers, infrared cameras. They were professional and thorough, and they told Luke nothing. By the time they finished, it was nearly 6. Luke was starting to wonder if Professor Yates was coming when a battered Honda Accord pulled up. The man who climbed out was in his 60s with wild gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore cargo pants and a faded K-State t-shirt, and he carried a weathered backpack that looked like it had seen every corner of Kansas. "Mr. Harwell." He extended a hand. "Dennis Yates, thank you for calling me." They shook, and Luke led him to the eastern field. By now, the path to the spiral was well worn from all the foot traffic. Yates moved through the corn like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, his eyes constantly scanning, taking in details. When they reached the spiral, Yates stopped dead. "Oh my God," he whispered. "It's real. It's actually real." He walked around the formation slowly, reverently, occasionally crouching to examine stalks or take pictures with an old film camera. He spent 15 minutes just observing, saying nothing. Finally, he straightened up and turned to Luke and Sierra. "This is genuine," he said. "No question. Look at the nodes." He pointed to where the stalks bent. "The cell structure is altered at the molecular level. The plants aren't broken, they're changed, heated from the inside, probably by microwave radiation. That's not something hoaxers can do. They can bend plants, sure, but not like this." "What about the pattern itself?" Sierra asked. "Does it mean anything?" Yates pulled out a notebook, flipping through pages of sketches and diagrams. "This spiral is one of the oldest symbols in human culture, found in ancient civilizations all over the world. Represents growth, evolution, the cosmos, but it's also mathematically significant. This spiral follows the Fibonacci sequence. See how each turn increases in proportion." Luke saw it. Once Yates pointed it out, it was obvious. Each ring of the spiral was larger than the last in a specific ratio. This isn't random, Yates continued. This is deliberate design, intelligent design. He looked at Luke seriously. Mr. Harwell, whoever or whatever created this, wanted you to know they understand mathematics, higher mathematics. They're demonstrating knowledge. Why? Luke asked. Why here? Why my field? That's the question, isn't it? Yates stood up, brushing off his pants. Let me show you something. He pulled out a rolled-up map from his backpack and spread it on the ground. It was a detailed map of Kansas, covered with red marks. These are every documented crop formation in Kansas for the last 40 years, Yates said. Most are clustered around high population areas, which suggests hoaxes. But look at this. He traced a line with his finger. The line ran through rural Kansas, through sparsely populated farm country, and it passed directly through Luke's property. There's a pattern, Yates continued. Formations appearing along specific geographical lines. Some researchers believe these lines correspond to underground water sources. Others think they follow electromagnetic anomalies in the Earth's crust. A few believe they're marking something more significant. Like what? Sierra asked. Yates folded up his map. There's a theory, not widely accepted, but growing in credibility, that certain locations on Earth are being marked. Tagged, if you will. Why? We don't know. For future reference? As part of some long-term study? Or as warnings? Warnings of what? That's above my pay grade, Yates said with a slight smile, echoing Agent Morrison's words from earlier. But Mr. Harwell, I can tell you this. Whatever happened here last night, you're now part of something much larger. This phenomenon is global. It's been happening for decades, and it's accelerating. More formations every year. More witnesses. More evidence. They walked back to the house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Yates promised to return the next day with more equipment, to take more detailed readings. As he was leaving, he paused by his car and looked back at the fields. You asked why here, he said to Luke. The honest answer is we don't know, but I can tell you what I believe. I believe you were chosen. Your land was chosen. And I believe whatever created that spiral will come back. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next month, maybe next year. But they'll come back. What should I do? Luke asked. Document everything. Stay alert, and Mr. Harwell? Yates's expression was grave. Don't be afraid. In all my years studying this, I've never found evidence of hostile intent. Whatever they are, whatever they want, they seem to be trying to communicate, not threaten. After Yates left, Luke and Sierra stood in the driveway as twilight deepened into night. The stars were coming out, more visible here than in town. Luke found himself studying them differently now, wondering which might not be stars at all. You want to stay in town again? Sierra asked. Luke thought about it. About running, about hiding, about letting fear drive him from his own land. About his father, who'd seen something in these fields decades ago and had stayed anyway. No, he said. This is my home. Whatever's happening, I'm not running from it. Then I'm staying too. They went inside together. Luke made dinner while Sierra checked in with the sheriff's department, learning that 2 more formations had been reported in neighboring counties. The phenomenon was spreading, or maybe it had always been there and people were just now talking about it. They ate, watched some TV, tried to pretend everything was normal. Around 11, Sierra fell asleep on the couch. Luke covered her with a blanket, then walked to the back door and looked out at his fields. The moon was bright tonight, nearly full. It painted the corn silver and cast long shadows. Everything looked peaceful, ordinary. But Luke knew better now. He knew those fields held secrets, held evidence of something beyond ordinary understanding. And part of him, the part that was his father's son, the part that had worked this land for decades, wanted to understand. He stepped outside, leaving the door open behind him. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of growing things. Luke walked toward the eastern field, stopping at the edge where corn met grass. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said quietly to the night. "I don't know what you are or what you want, but if you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening." For a long moment, there was only silence and the whisper of wind through corn. Then, softly at first but growing steadily brighter, a glow appeared deep in the field. Not the intense blue-white of before, but something gentler, warmer, almost golden. Luke's breath caught. He took a step forward, then another. The light pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat. And Luke understood. Without words, without explanation, he simply understood. This was a greeting, an acknowledgement. They knew he was here, they knew he was listening, and they were saying hello in the only way they could. The light held for maybe 10 seconds, then slowly faded, dimming until it was gone completely. Luke stood there for a long time, looking at the spot where the light had been. He felt different somehow, changed, not in a frightening way, but in a fundamental way, like a door had opened in his mind, showing him a universe larger and stranger than he'd ever imagined. Finally, he turned and walked back to the house. Sierra was still asleep on the couch. Luke settled into his recliner, pulling the spare blanket over himself. He fell asleep watching the stars through the window, and for the first time since this had started, he didn't have nightmares. When morning came, Luke woke to find Sierra already up, coffee made, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop. "There are hundreds of them," she said without preamble. "I've been searching all morning. Reports from all over Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, all from last night. Luke, this wasn't just us. This was everywhere." Luke looked at her screen. She was right. Social media was flooded with photos and videos. Lights in the sky, crop formations, equipment failures, all from the same night, all across the plains. "Whatever they are," Sierra said quietly, "they're not hiding anymore." Luke's phone buzzed. A text from Tom Rodriguez. "Turn on the news." He did. The local morning news was leading with the story. "Unexplained phenomenon across Kansas," the banner read. The anchor was interviewing farmers, showing aerial footage of formations, talking to scientists who had no explanations. Agent Morrison appeared on screen, his face professionally neutral. "We are investigating multiple reports of unusual activity," he said. "At this time, we have no evidence of any threat to public safety." "No evidence of threat," Sierra repeated. "But they're not saying it didn't happen. They're not calling it hoaxes or weather. They're actually admitting something happened." Luke's phone rang. It was Professor Yates. "Are you seeing this?" Yates asked, his voice excited. "Mr. Harwell, this is unprecedented. Not the formations themselves, but the scale, the coordinated nature, and the fact that it's being covered honestly by the media and investigated by the government. This changes everything. What does it mean? It means they wanted attention. They wanted us to notice, to acknowledge, to respond. Mr. Harwell, I think we're witnessing first contact, not the Hollywood version with spaceships and invasions, but something subtler, something more profound. They're showing us they're here, they're aware of us, and they want dialogue." After hanging up, Luke walked outside. The morning was beautiful, the sun bright and warm. His fields stretched out in every direction, corn ready for harvest, soil rich and productive. Somewhere out there in the eastern field, a spiral waited, A message in corn written by hands unknown, asking questions humans had pondered since they first looked up at the stars. Are we alone? No, Luke thought. No, we're not. Sierra joined him, slipping her hand into his. What happens now? She asked. I don't know, Luke said honestly. We harvest the corn, we fix the equipment, we keep farming, and we watch the sky. Because I don't think this is over. I think it's just beginning. They stood together in the Kansas morning, two small figures against an endless horizon, while somewhere above them, beyond the blue, something watched and waited, and perhaps smiled at the humans who were finally starting to understand. The corn line had appeared overnight, a message written in bent stalks and impossibility. But it was more than just a mystery to solve or a phenomenon to document. It was a conversation starter, and Luke Harwell, third-generation Kansas farmer, was ready to talk. The first sign something was wrong came at 11:47 p.m. on September 3, 2021, when every GPS device within a 15-mile radius of Hays, Kansas, simply stopped working. Grant Pollard didn't notice it at first. He was 3 miles into his nightly patrol of the county roads, his Dodge Ram's headlights cutting through the darkness, when his phone's navigation app flickered and went blank. The blue dot that had been tracking his position vanished, replaced by a spinning wheel that never resolved. Damn it, Grant muttered, tapping the screen. Nothing. He pulled over onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under his tires, and tried to restart the app. Still nothing. The screen showed him the last cached map data, but no signal, no position, no route. Grant was the Ellis County Road Maintenance Supervisor, which meant he spent his nights checking for storm damage, livestock on the roads, and the occasional drunk driver who'd missed a turn. He knew these roads by heart, had driven them for 12 years, but he still relied on the GPS to log his route and mark problem areas for the day crew. He tried his truck's built-in navigation system. Same result. A no-signal message where his position should be. That's when Grant's radio crackled to life. He'd been listening to a classic rock station out of Salina, but now the music cut out mid-song, replaced by static. Pure, white noise static. Grant reached for the dial to change the station, but before he could turn it, the static shifted. It became something else. A low drone, like a massive engine idling far away, or like wind howling through a cave. The sound rose and fell in waves, never quite resolving into anything recognizable, but definitely not random static. Grant turned the dial. Every station was the same. Every single frequency, from 88.1 to 107.9, carried that same droning sound. He shut the radio off. Silence filled the truck, broken only by the idle of his engine and the occasional tick of cooling metal. Grant looked out at the darkness surrounding him. To his left, a wheat field stretched toward the horizon, recently harvested stubble barely visible in the starlight. To his right, the Saline River bottomland, thick with cottonwoods and brush. Ahead and behind, the county road cutting a straight line through rural Kansas. No lights anywhere. No farmhouses visible from here. No other vehicles. Just darkness, and that feeling of being very, very alone. Grant pulled out his radio handset, the county frequency transceiver that connected him to dispatch. He pressed the transmit button. "Dispatch, this is Road 7. You copy?" Static. The same droning static that had infected his truck's radio. "Dispatch, Road 7, radio check." The drone continued, unchanged by his transmission. It was like the frequency itself had been hijacked, overridden by something far more powerful than the county's repeater tower. Grant's unease turned to genuine concern. In 12 years, he'd never lost contact with dispatch. The system had redundancies, backup frequencies, protocols for emergencies. This shouldn't be possible. He decided to drive to the nearest farm and use a landline. The Morrison place was about 2 miles east, and old Jim Morrison always left his porch light on. Grant put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the road. That's when he saw the lights. Not ahead of him, not on the road. Above. 3 points of light arranged in a perfect triangle, moving silently across the sky from north to south. They were maybe 1,000 feet up, Grant guessed, though it was hard to judge distance in the dark. The lights were steady, not blinking like aircraft navigation lights should, and they were bright, brighter than any plane he'd ever seen at night. As Grant watched, the triangle of light slowed, then stopped completely. They hung in the air, perfectly motionless, directly over the wheat field to his left. Grant killed his truck's engine. The sudden silence was profound. No wind, no insects, nothing. The lights continued to hover, steady and bright. He got out of the truck, legs shaky, and stood on the shoulder of the road. The air felt wrong. Thick, almost, like the pressure had changed. Like standing outside right before a tornado drops, that electric tension in the atmosphere. The lights began to pulse. All 3 perfectly synchronized, brightening and dimming in a slow rhythm. Bright, dim, bright, dim. Each pulse lasted maybe 2 seconds. Grant's hands were trembling. He wanted to get back in his truck, wanted to drive away, but something held him there. Some combination of fear and fascination, and the simple inability to believe what he was seeing. The lights pulsed faster. Bright, dim, bright, dim, bright, dim. A steady rhythm now, almost like a heartbeat. Or a signal. Then they began to descend. Grant stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. The lights were dropping straight down, maintaining their triangular formation, still pulsing in perfect unison. They descended slowly, deliberately, until they were maybe 200 feet above the wheat field. That's when Grant heard the sound. It started as a vibration he felt more than heard, a deep bass note that made his chest cavity resonate. It grew louder, deeper, until it was a physical presence pressing against him like a wave. Not painful, but overwhelming, impossible to ignore. The lights flared brighter, so bright Grant had to shield his eyes. The sound intensified, became almost unbearable. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The lights vanished. The sound cut off. The oppressive feeling in the air dissipated like someone had opened a valve and let the pressure out. Grant stood on the dark road, breathing hard, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at his watch. 11:59 p.m. He'd pulled over at 11:47. 12 minutes had passed, but it felt like seconds. His truck's radio came back to life, classic rock playing as if nothing had happened. Grant nearly jumped out of his skin at the sudden noise. He yanked the door open and turned it off, then just stood there trying to process what he'd witnessed. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out with shaking hands. The GPS app had reloaded. The blue dot marking his position on County Road 18, exactly where he'd stopped. A text message appeared. From dispatch, Road 7, requesting status update. You missed your 11:45 check-in. Grant stared at the message. 11:45. That was before he'd pulled over, before the GPS had failed. He called dispatch. Mary Kaufman answered on the second ring. Road 7, you okay? You've been off the grid for the last 15 minutes. Mary, did you get any reports tonight about lights or radio interference? Lights? What kind of lights? Just anything unusual. Any calls from people seeing strange things. There was a pause. Grant, are you feeling all right? You sound shaken. I'm fine. I saw something, 3 lights, arranged in a triangle. They were hovering over the Morrison wheat field, and all my electronics went dead, GPS, radio, everything. Another pause, longer this time. Grant, I'm showing your GPS signal dropped at 11:47 and came back at midnight. And we did lose radio contact, but lights? No one else has called anything in. Can you check with the sheriff's department, see if they've gotten any reports? Hold on. Grant waited, watching the dark field where the lights had been. Nothing moved, nothing made a sound. It was just an empty Kansas wheat field under a star-filled sky. Mary came back. Sheriff's department hasn't gotten anything, but Grant, they said their GPS was acting up too. County-wide outage for about 12 minutes. They thought it was a satellite problem. What about radar? Does the airport show anything? Grant, what did you see? He told her everything. The lights, the sound, the feeling of pressure in the air. Mary listened without interrupting, which he appreciated. She'd worked dispatch for 23 years and had heard all kinds of strange reports. She knew when someone was serious. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to flag this for the supervisor, she finally said. And Grant, maybe you should come back to the yard. Let someone else finish your patrol tonight. No, I'm fine. I'll complete my route. Grant, I'm fine, Mary. I'll check in at the standard intervals. He hung up before she could argue. He wasn't fine, not really, but the idea of driving back, of explaining what he'd seen to a supervisor, of filling out reports and answering questions. He couldn't face that right now. Grant got back in his truck and continued east toward the Morrison farm. He needed to talk to Jim Morrison, needed to know if the old farmer had seen anything. Jim was usually up late, watching old westerns on cable. The Morrison farmhouse appeared around a bend, its porch light a beacon in the darkness. Grant pulled into the long driveway, gravel popping under his tires. The house looked normal. Lights on in the living room, Jim's pickup parked by the barn. Grant knocked on the door. After a moment, Jim opened it, his weathered face creasing in surprise. Grant, everything all right? Hey, Jim, sorry to bother you so late. Can I ask you something? Sure, come on in. Jim's living room was exactly as Grant remembered from previous visits. Comfortable furniture, walls covered with family photos and farm memorabilia, an old console TV playing a John Wayne movie with the sound muted. Jim, did you notice anything strange tonight, around midnight? The old farmer scratched his chin. Strange how? Lights in the sky, or your electronics acting up. Radio cutting out, maybe? Jim's expression changed. Now that you mention it, my TV went fuzzy for a bit. Cable box reset itself, and my hearing aids went dead for a few minutes, which they've never done before. Had to replace the batteries even though I'd just put new ones in yesterday. He studied Grant. What's going on? Grant told him about the lights. Jim listened, his expression growing more serious. I didn't see anything, Jim said when Grant finished. But I was in here, curtains drawn. If something was out in the field, I wouldn't have noticed. He walked to his window and pulled the curtain aside, looking out at his dark acreage. You think it was some kind of military thing? Drones or something? I don't know what it was. You call the sheriff. Dispatch knows. They're looking into it. Jim nodded slowly. My granddad used to tell stories, about lights in the fields. This was back in the 40s and 50s. He said everyone saw them, but no one talked about it much. Didn't want to be thought crazy. He let the curtain fall back. You want coffee? You look like you could use some. Grant accepted gratefully. They sat at Jim's kitchen table, drinking coffee and not saying much. The normalcy of it helped. The warm mug in his hands, the familiar smell of coffee and old farmhouse, the ticking of the clock on the wall. Grant's phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. Grant Pollard? This is Ava Ridley. I'm a journalist with the Hayes Daily News. I heard there was an incident tonight. Would you be willing to talk? Grant stared at the message. How had she gotten his number? How did she already know about what happened? He texted back, "Who gave you my information?" The response came quickly. Source at County Dispatch. I cover unusual events for the paper. I'd like to hear your account firsthand. Grant showed Jim the message. The old farmer shrugged. Up to you, son. But if you're going to tell the story, might as well get it out there properly. Better than having rumors flying around. Grant thought about it. Jim had a point. Small towns ran on gossip, and weird stories traveled fast. If he was going to deal with this, better to control the narrative. He texted back, "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., County Road Maintenance Yard. I'll be there. Thank you." Grant finished his coffee and said goodnight to Jim. As he walked back to his truck, he paused and looked up at the sky. Stars stretched from horizon to horizon, more than you could ever see in a city, beautiful and vast and utterly indifferent. Were we alone out here? Grant had never really thought about it before. Now he couldn't stop thinking about it. He completed the rest of his patrol without incident. The GPS worked normally. The radio played classic rock without interruption. The roads were clear and empty, but Grant couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That the night had opened up and shown him something he wasn't supposed to see. And that somewhere out there, in the darkness above the Kansas plains, something was watching. Ava Ridley arrived at the County Road Maintenance Yard at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. Grant watched her pull up in a silver Subaru Outback, press credentials visible on the dashboard. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything. "Mr. Pollard, Ava Ridley." She extended her hand. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." They shook. Her grip was firm, professional. "Call me Grant. You want to talk out here or inside?" "Inside would be good. I want to record the interview if that's okay." They settled in the break room, a small space with a coffee maker, a scarred table, and chairs that had seen better days. Ava set up a digital recorder and pulled out a notebook. "So," she began, "tell me what happened last night. Start from the beginning." Grant told her everything. The GPS failure, the radio static, the lights in their perfect triangle formation, the sound that felt like it could shake him apart, the way everything just vanished, as if it had never been there. Ava took notes while the recorder ran, occasionally asking clarifying questions. She didn't interrupt, didn't express skepticism, just listened and wrote. "And dispatch confirmed the GPS outage?" she asked when he finished. 12-minute county-wide failure, from 11:47 to midnight. "What about other witnesses? Anyone else see the lights?" "Not that I know of, but it was late, and that's a pretty remote area. Jim Morrison's farm is the closest occupied structure, and he was inside." Ava tapped her pen against her notebook. "Grant, can I be straight with you? Please. You're not the first person to report something like this. I've been covering stories like yours for 3 years now, ever since I moved to Kansas from Colorado. UFO sightings, unexplained phenomena, equipment failures. The paper usually buries my articles in the back pages, but I keep digging because the pattern is real, and it's getting more frequent." Grant leaned forward. "What pattern?" "Clusters of sightings, always in rural areas, always involving electronic interference. GPS failures, radio disruptions, electrical problems, and almost always at night." She flipped through her notebook. In the last 6 months, I've documented 15 similar incidents within a 50-mile radius of Hayes. None made the main news. People don't want to be ridiculed, so they don't report. Or if they do report, it gets dismissed. 15? Grant felt a chill. Why haven't I heard about this? Because no one's connecting the dots. Each incident is treated as isolated. Equipment malfunction, misidentified aircraft, weather phenomena. But when you plot them on a map, she pulled out her phone and showed him a Google Maps screenshot with red pins scattered across rural Kansas. Look at the distribution. Look at the timing. Grant studied the map. The pins formed a rough circular pattern, centered somewhere northwest of Hayes, and the dates Ava had noted showed increasing frequency. 1 sighting in March, 2 in April, 3 in May. The numbers kept climbing. "What's at the center?" Grant asked, pointing to the approximate middle of the circle. "That's the interesting part. Nothing. Just farmland, and an old Cold War-era radio relay station that's been decommissioned since the 80s. Could that be relevant? Some kind of military thing?" "Maybe, but military exercises are announced. They don't cause civilian GPS failures." Ava put her phone away. "Grant, I know this sounds crazy. Trust me, I know. But something is happening here, something systematic, and I think your sighting last night is part of it." Before Grant could respond, his phone rang. Mary from dispatch. "Grant, I need you to come into the office. The supervisor wants to talk to you about last night's report." "On my way." He hung up and looked at Ava. "I've got to go, but if you want to keep digging into this, I'll help however I can." "Can I reach out if I have more questions?" "Yeah. And Ava, if you find anything, let me know." They exchanged numbers. As Ava was packing up her recording equipment, Grant's phone buzzed with a text from Jim Morrison. "Turn on your radio. AM 1520. Something weird." Grant frowned. AM 1520 was the local emergency broadcast frequency, rarely used except for weather alerts. "Hold on," he told Ava. He walked to his truck and turned on the radio, tuning to AM 1520. Static, but not normal static. The same droning sound he'd heard last night. Ava had followed him. "What is that?" "It's the same thing that was on every frequency last night." Grant turned the volume up. The drone rose and fell, that strange, almost organic quality to it. Like something alive trying to communicate through dead electronics. They stood there, listening for maybe 30 seconds. The drone continued, unchanging. Then, very faintly, beneath the drone, Grant heard something else. "Wait," he said, turning the volume higher. "You hear that?" Ava leaned closer to the speaker. "Hear what?" "There's something in the static. Something..." It was subtle, easy to miss. But once Grant heard it, he couldn't unhear it. A pattern, a rhythm, and maybe, just maybe, something that sounded like words. "We need to record this," Ava said, already pulling out her phone. She held it near the speaker, recording app open. They listened for another 2 minutes. The drone continued, and that ghost of something underneath it persisted. But Grant couldn't make out any specific sounds, couldn't quite isolate what he was hearing. Finally, the drone cut off abruptly. Normal static replaced it. Then the station went silent altogether. Ava stopped recording. "I'm going to analyze this, see if there's actually something there or if we're just hearing what we want to hear. Let me know what you find." As she drove away, Grant stood by his truck, thinking about patterns and frequencies and lights in the sky. He thought about Jim Morrison's granddad and his stories from the 40s and 50s, about how some things didn't change, just repeated in cycles we didn't understand. His phone rang. Mary again. "Grant, where are you? The supervisor is waiting." The meeting was brief and uncomfortable. His supervisor, Tom Brennan, listened to Grant's report with increasing skepticism, made a note about the GPS outage being investigated by County IT, and suggested Grant might want to take a few days off to rest. Grant declined. He had work to do. The rest of the day passed in a blur of maintenance calls and paperwork. Grant kept his radio tuned to AM 1520, but it remained silent. No drone, no static, nothing unusual. At 6 p.m. his shift ended. Grant drove home to his small house on the outskirts of Hayes, heated up leftover pizza, and tried to pretend everything was normal. His phone buzzed. "Ava Ridley. Call me. Now." "I found something in the recording." Grant called immediately. Ava answered on the first ring. "I ran the audio through a spectral analysis program," she said without preamble. "The kind that can isolate frequencies and filter out noise. Grant, there's definitely something in that drone. Something regular, repeating. I'm sending you the file now." His phone pinged with an incoming email. Grant put Ava on speaker and opened the attachment. It was an audio file labeled AM 1520 filtered MP3. He played it. The drone was gone, filtered out. What remained was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. A voice, distorted, pitched down almost to inaudibility, but definitely a human voice speaking. Grant turned up the volume. The voice repeated the same phrase over and over. "They came back. Don't look." Grant's blood ran cold. "You hear it?" Ava asked. "Yeah, I hear it." "Grant, someone recorded that message. Someone embedded it in that carrier signal. The question is, who and why?" "They came back," Grant repeated. "Came back from where? And why shouldn't we look?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out. That old relay station I mentioned, the one at the center of all these sightings, I'm going there tomorrow to check it out. You want to come?" Grant should have said no. Should have thanked her for her research and gone back to his normal life. Should have forgotten about lights in the sky and warnings and static. Instead, he said, "What time?" 7 a.m. I'll text you the coordinates." After hanging up, Grant played the filtered audio file again. And again, that distorted voice, repeating its cryptic warning. "They came back. Don't look." He pulled up a map on his laptop and found the location Ava had mentioned. The old relay station was about 18 miles northwest of Hayes, in the middle of nowhere. According to the satellite view, it was just a few abandoned buildings and a tall radio tower, surrounded by empty farmland. Grant zoomed in on the tower. In the satellite image, it cast a long shadow across the prairie. At the tower's base, he could just make out what looked like equipment sheds and a small concrete building. He switched to street view, but the closest the Google car had gotten was about a mile away, on a county road. From that distance, the tower was barely visible above the rolling hills. Grant grabbed a beer from his fridge and sat on his back porch, watching the sunset over the Kansas plains. The sky turned orange, then purple, then deep blue. Stars began to appear. He thought about last night, about those 3 lights in their perfect triangle, about the sound that had resonated in his chest, about the way everything had stopped, gone silent, as if the whole world was holding its breath. They came back. Came back from where? Space? Another dimension? The past? And don't look at what? Grant finished his beer and went inside. He tried to watch TV but couldn't focus. Tried to read but couldn't concentrate. Finally, around 11 p.m., he gave up and went to bed. He lay in the darkness, staring at his ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. about driving out to an abandoned Cold War facility with a journalist he barely knew, looking for what? Answers? Explanations? His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. Grant sat up, heart suddenly racing. He called the number back. It rang once, then disconnected. He tried again. Same result. He texted, "Who is this?" No response. Grant got out of bed and checked his doors and windows. Everything was locked. He turned on the outside lights, flooding his small yard with LED brightness. Nothing moved out there. No cars on the street. No shadows where they shouldn't be. Just his imagination and a vague threat from an anonymous number. Grant didn't sleep much that night. When his alarm went off at 6 a.m., he was already awake. He showered, dressed, and made coffee. At 6:45, another text came in, this time from Ava. "Meet at the truck stop on Highway 40. We'll convoy out together." Grant texted back his agreement, grabbed his jacket, and headed out. The morning was clear and cold, that crisp September weather when summer finally gives way to autumn. Grant's breath fogged in the air as he walked to his truck. The streets were quiet, most of Hayes still asleep. He arrived at the truck stop first. A few semi-trailers were parked in the lot, their drivers probably inside having breakfast. Grant pulled into a spot near the entrance and waited. Ava arrived 10 minutes later. She parked next to him and gestured for him to follow. They got onto Highway 40 heading northwest, leaving Hayes behind. The landscape opened up, becoming more and more remote. Wheat fields and pasture land, interrupted occasionally by small stands of trees or abandoned homesteads. The road was straight and empty. After about 15 miles, Ava's brake lights flashed. She slowed and turned onto a dirt road that barely qualified as a road at all, more like 2 tire tracks through the grass. Grant followed, his truck bouncing over ruts and rocks. They drove for another 3 miles, climbing gradually. The radio tower appeared on the horizon, a skeletal spire reaching into the pale morning sky. As they got closer, Grant could see the facility more clearly. A concrete bunker-style building, maybe 30 by 40 feet, 2 smaller equipment sheds, their metal walls rusted and peeling, and the tower itself, at least 200 feet tall, topped with the microwave relay dishes that hadn't transmitted in decades. A fence surrounded the compound, chain link topped with barbed wire, but the gate was open, hanging from a single hinge. Ava parked outside the fence. Grant pulled up beside her. They got out and met at the gate. "You sure about this?" Grant asked. "This is technically trespassing. It's abandoned federal property. No one's going to care." Ava pulled out her camera. "Come on." They walked through the gate. Up close, the facility looked even more decrepit. Weeds grew through cracks in the concrete. The equipment shed doors were missing. Graffiti covered some of the walls, but the tower looked maintained. The metal wasn't rusted. The bolts weren't corroded. And at its base, a heavy steel door was secured with a modern padlock. "That's new," Ava said, photographing the lock. "Why would someone secure an abandoned tower? Maybe it's not as abandoned as we thought." They circled the main building. Most of the windows were broken, but one had been recently covered with plywood. Fresh plywood, from what Grant could tell, not weathered or faded. Ava tried the main door. Locked. "We're not breaking in," Grant said. "I'm not suggesting we break in. I'm suggesting we look around a little more." Behind the main building, they found tire tracks, fresh ones, in the dirt and weeds. Someone had driven a vehicle back here recently. Following the tracks, they came to a concrete pad with a steel hatch set into it. The hatch had a wheel lock, like a submarine door. and there was a small indicator light next to it, glowing faint red. Powered. This facility was definitely not abandoned. "Ava," Grant said quietly, "we need to leave. Now." She was photographing the hatch. Just a few more. The hatch wheel began to turn. They ran. Grant grabbed Ava's arm and pulled her toward their vehicles. Behind them, he heard the hatch clang open, heard boots on concrete. "Hey, stop!" They didn't stop. They reached the gate, sprinted through it, dove into their trucks. Grant started his engine, threw it in gear, and floored it down the dirt road, Ava right behind him. In his rear-view mirror, he saw two figures emerge from the facility, men in dark uniforms. One raised something to his face. Binoculars, maybe, or a radio. Grant didn't slow down until they hit the paved county road. Ava pulled alongside him, gesturing frantically. Grant rolled down his window. "Follow me," she shouted. "Not back to town. They might follow." She turned east instead of south, onto a farm road Grant didn't recognize. He followed, his heart still racing. After 5 miles of winding through farmland, Ava pulled over next to an empty cattle pen. Grant parked behind her. "What the hell was that?" he demanded as they got out. "I don't know, but that facility isn't abandoned. Someone's using it. Someone who doesn't want visitors." She was scrolling through the photos on her camera. "I got pictures of everything. The new lock, the hatch, the indicator light. This is proof something's going on." "Proof of what? That we trespassed on government property and almost got caught?" "Grant, think about it. An old Cold War relay station, supposedly decommissioned, sitting at the exact center of a cluster of UFO sightings. Fresh equipment, active power, guards. What does that tell you? That we're in over our heads. Or that we're onto something." Ava looked at him seriously. "You heard that warning. They came back. Don't look. What if the government knows? What if they've always known? And what if that facility is part of whatever's happening?" Grant wanted to argue. Wanted to say she was jumping to conclusions, seeing conspiracies where none existed. But he'd seen those lights, heard that drone, found that message hidden in the static. And now he'd seen an abandoned facility that clearly wasn't abandoned. "What do we do?" he asked. "We find out who owns that property now. We find out what they're doing there. And we find out what they came back means." Before Grant could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. A text from the same unknown number that had messaged Grant last night. "Last warning. Walk away." They looked at each other. "You getting scared?" Ava asked. "Terrified," Grant admitted. "Good, me too, but I'm not stopping." Neither was Grant. Whatever this was, whatever was happening in the skies over Kansas, he needed to understand it, even if the answer terrified him more than the question. They decided to split up. Ava would research property records and try to track down who currently held the deed to the old relay station. Grant would go back to work and keep his ear to the ground for any new reports of unusual activity. But first, they agreed to meet with Jim Morrison. The old farmer had mentioned his grandfather's stories, and Ava wanted to hear them firsthand. They found Jim in his barn, working on his tractor. He looked up as they approached, wiping grease from his hands. "Morning, folks. You look like you've seen a ghost." "Jim, Grant told me you mentioned your grandfather's stories," Ava said. "About lights in the fields. Can you tell me more about that?" Jim set down his wrench and gestured to some bales of hay. They sat, and he leaned against his tractor thinking. "Granddad used to farm this same land," Jim began. "This was back in the late 40s, early 50s. One summer he started seeing things, lights in the sky at night. Sometimes just one, sometimes several. They'd hover over the fields, moving in ways that didn't make sense. No sound, no engine noise, just silence. Did he ever report it? Ava asked. To who? This was 1949, 1950. You tell people you saw flying saucers, they'd lock you up. But Granddad wasn't alone. Other farmers saw them too. They'd talk about it among themselves, quiet-like, but never official. What happened to the lights? Grant asked. They stopped, just like they started. But here's the thing. Before they stopped, military folks came around, asking questions, telling people not to talk about what they'd seen. Said it was classified aircraft testing, nothing to worry about. Jim paused. Granddad never bought that explanation. He said those lights were too strange, too impossible. And he said the military men seemed more interested in what the lights were doing than in explaining them away. Did your grandfather ever mention a relay station? Ava asked. Or any kind of government facility being built? Jim's expression changed. Now that you mention it, yeah, there was something. I was just a kid, but I remember Granddad talking about how they were building some kind of communication tower. This would have been mid-50s. He said it went up fast, almost overnight. And after that, the lights became less frequent. Like whatever they were being monitored or controlled somehow. Ava and Grant exchanged glances. Jim, do you remember anything specific about the tower? Ava pressed. Where it was, what it looked like? Northwest of here, maybe 20 miles. Tall thing, you could see it from pretty far away. Granddad said it gave him a bad feeling. Said the air around it felt wrong. The air feels wrong. Grant remembered that sensation from 2 nights ago, standing on the road watching those lights. The pressure, the thickness, the sense that reality itself had become unstable. They thanked Jim and drove back to town. At a coffee shop, Ava opened her laptop and started digging. Property records show the relay station was decommissioned in 1983, she said, scrolling through documents. Ownership transferred to the Department of Defense, but in '97 it was sold to a private company called Meridian Solutions Group. What do they do? According to their website, they're a defense contractor specializing in telecommunications and signal intelligence. But that's a cover. Look at this. She turned the laptop so Grant could see. Meridian has ties to at least a dozen shell companies, all linked back to Pentagon black budget projects. They're deep into classified work. So the government still controls that facility, just through a contractor. Exactly. Which means whatever's happening there is intentional. It's not abandoned, it's active. Grant's phone rang. Mary from dispatch. Grant, we just got a call. Multiple reports of GPS failures, same as the other night. It's happening again. Where? Northwest sector. Same general area as your sighting. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Ava. It's happening again. They drove northwest, following the reports. As they got closer to the relay station, Grant's GPS flickered and died. The radio filled with static, then that familiar drone. Ava pulled over. Grant parked behind her. They got out and looked up. There, high above, barely visible in the afternoon sunlight, were the lights. 3 of them in a perfect triangle, moving slowly across the sky. But this time, they weren't alone. Other cars had stopped. People were getting out, pointing, filming with their phones. Grant counted at least 6 other vehicles on this stretch of road. This is different, Ava said. This is broad daylight, multiple witnesses. The lights began to pulse. Bright, dim, bright, dim. That same rhythm Grant had seen before. Then something new happened. The lights split apart. The triangle broke, and each light went a different direction. One headed north, one south, one west. They moved fast, too fast, crossing miles in seconds. and then they were gone. The drone on the radio cut off. GPS signals returned. It was over. But everyone on that road had seen it. Grant looked around at the other witnesses. Farmers, truckers, a family in an SUV. They all stood there, stunned, staring at the empty sky. Ava was already interviewing them, recording their statements. Grant walked to a young couple who were still filming. "Did you get it?" he asked. "Did you record the lights?" The man nodded, reviewing his footage. "Yeah, I got it. Look." Grant watched the video. The lights were clear and unmistakable. Bright points moving in ways no aircraft could match, then splitting apart at impossible speeds. "Send me that," Grant said. "Please. This is important." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, okay. What's your number?" After collecting contact information from several witnesses, Grant and Ava regrouped. "This changes everything," Ava said. "Multiple witnesses in daylight with video evidence. This can't be dismissed or covered up. Unless someone tries really hard to dismiss it," Grant said. He was thinking about those men at the facility, about the warnings, about how much effort someone was putting into keeping this quiet. His phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "You were warned." Grant showed it to Ava. Her jaw tightened. "They're watching us," she said. "They know where we are." "Then let's give them something to watch." Grant called the sheriff's department directly, asking to speak with Sheriff Daniels. After a brief hold, the sheriff came on. "Grant, what's this about?" "Sheriff, I need to file a formal report, UFO sighting, multiple witnesses, with video evidence. And I need you to investigate the Meridian Solutions facility northwest of here." There was a long pause. "Grant, I can't just—" "Sheriff, something is happening. Something big. And if we don't investigate it properly, if we let it get buried, we're failing in our duty to protect this community." Another pause. Then, "Come to my office. Bring your witnesses." They spent the next 4 hours at the sheriff's department. Grant, Ava, and 5 other witnesses gave statements. They showed their videos. They marked locations on maps. Sheriff Daniels listened to everything, his expression growing more serious by the minute. "I'll be honest with you," he finally said. "This is above my jurisdiction, but I'm going to forward this to the Air Force, to the FAA, and to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Someone needs to investigate that facility. And if they don't," Ava asked, "then I'll do it myself." That evening, exhausted and wired on too much coffee, Grant drove home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful and normal and completely at odds with the strangeness of the day. His phone rang. Ava. "Turn on Channel 7 News, now." Grant pulled over and found a stream on his phone. The local news was leading with their story. Multiple UFO sightings, witness statements, video evidence. They even mentioned the old relay station and its mysterious private ownership. The report was factual, balanced, but it didn't shy away from the implications. Something unexplained was happening in the skies over Kansas. Grant's phone exploded with texts and calls. Friends, family, co-workers, everyone wanted to know what he'd seen, what he thought was happening. He ignored most of them. But he answered when Jim Morrison called. "I saw the news," Jim said. "You know what this means, don't you?" "What?" "It means they can't hide it anymore. Whatever's going on, whatever those lights are, too many people have seen them now. The truth's coming out one way or another." After hanging up, Grant sat in his truck, watching the sun disappear below the horizon. Stars began to appear, one by one, filling the darkening sky. Were we being watched? Had we always been watched? And why now? Why, after decades of secrecy and denial, were these encounters becoming more frequent, more obvious? Grant thought about that message hidden in the radio static. They came back. Don't look. They came back as if they'd been here before, as if history was repeating itself. Don't look, but it was too late for that. Everyone was looking now. His phone buzzed, a text from Ava. Check your email, I found something. Grant opened his email on his phone. Ava had sent him a scanned document, old and faded. It looked like a government memo from 1951. The subject line read, Project Sentinel, Kansas Site Operational. Grant zoomed in and read, Relay station construction complete. Monitoring equipment in place. Initial test of communication protocol successful. Subjects responded to carrier signal. Recommend continued observation and documentation. Warning protocols established for local population should subjects return. Subjects. They were calling them subjects, as if they were part of an experiment. Another paragraph caught Grant's eye. If subjects return to previous visitation sites, local population must be warned not to engage or maintain visual contact. Direct observation appears to trigger increased activity. Protocol. Embed warning in standard emergency broadcast frequency using coded message. Grant's hands were shaking. They'd known. The government had known since at least 1951. And they'd set up that relay station not to communicate with these visitors, but to warn people away from them. They came back. Don't look. It was a warning that had been broadcast for 70 years. A warning most people would never hear, because most people didn't listen to emergency frequencies. But it was there, embedded in the system, waiting. Grant called Ava. You found it too, she said as soon as she answered. Project Sentinel. It's been active this whole time, Grant. For 70 years, they've been monitoring these visitors, warning people off, keeping it all classified. But why? If these things aren't hostile, if they're just observing us or whatever they're doing, why hide it? Because they don't understand it. Because admitting it would mean admitting how little control we actually have, because it would change everything. Grant looked up at the stars again. How many of those points of light were just stars, and how many were something else? What do we do now? He asked. We keep digging, we keep asking questions, and we don't let them bury this. Over the next week, the story grew. News outlets picked it up. Other witnesses came forward with their own stories, some recent, some decades old. The dam had broken, and the flood of testimony was impossible to contain. The Air Force announced an investigation. The FAA said they were reviewing radar data. Meridian Solutions released a statement denying any involvement in unusual activities. But the evidence kept mounting. Videos, photographs, witness statements. GPS logs showing system-wide failures. Audio recordings of that strange drone on multiple frequencies. Grant gave interview after interview, always careful with his words, always sticking to what he'd actually seen. He became a reluctant spokesperson for something he still didn't fully understand. 3 weeks after that first sighting, Grant got a call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Pollard, my name is Dr. Elena Santos. I'm a physicist at MIT, specializing in electromagnetic phenomena. I've been following your story, and I'd like to meet with you. They met at a diner in Hayes. Dr. Santos was a small woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and intense eyes. She carried a worn leather briefcase. I'm going to be direct with you, she said, after they'd ordered coffee. What you witnessed wasn't extraterrestrial. Grant felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. Then what was it? It was terrestrial, but not human-made, at least not entirely. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Have you heard of ball lightning? Or earthquake lights? Vaguely. They're natural phenomena that we still don't fully understand. Plasma formations, electromagnetic anomalies that appear during certain atmospheric or geological conditions. They can move in ways that seem impossible, can cause electronic interference, can even appear to be controlled or intelligent. You think that's what I saw? Partially. But here's where it gets interesting. She showed him data on her tablet. The area around that relay station sits on top of a unique geological formation. Limestone bedrock with high concentrations of quartz and other piezoelectric materials. When seismic pressure builds up, and there's been increased seismic activity in Kansas recently, those materials generate electrical fields. And those fields create lights? Not just lights. Electromagnetic phenomena that could potentially interface with electronic systems. Your GPS failures, the radio interference, all of it could be explained by a natural but extremely unusual electromagnetic event. Grant wanted to believe her. It was a rational explanation, grounded in science. But what about the pattern? He asked. The triangle formation, the synchronized pulsing, the way they split up and moved in different directions. Dr. Santos hesitated. That's the part I can't explain. Natural phenomena shouldn't show that level of coordination unless what? Unless the electromagnetic fields are somehow creating a feedback loop with the monitoring equipment at that facility. If their systems are trying to track and measure the phenomena, they might inadvertently be shaping it, giving it structure and pattern. It was a stretch, Grant thought, but maybe possible. What about Project Sentinel? He asked. The government memo from 1951. That's government bureaucracy dealing with something they don't understand. They saw unusual phenomena. They built a monitoring station. They created protocols, standard operating procedure for the Cold War era. They talked for another hour. Dr. Santos's explanations were compelling, well-researched, based on solid science. And yet Grant couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something, or choosing not to see it. When she left, she handed him her card. If you see anything else, call me. I'm assembling a research team to study this area. With your cooperation, we might finally understand what's happening here. Grant pocketed the card and sat alone in the diner, drinking cold coffee and thinking. That night, he drove out to the Morrison wheat field, the place where he'd first seen the lights. He parked on the shoulder and got out, looking up at the clear night sky. The stars were brilliant, undiminished by city lights. The Milky Way stretched across the sky, a river of light. Grant's phone buzzed. A text from Ava. At the relay station, you need to see this. He called her immediately. Ava, what are you doing there? It's not safe. I'm not inside the fence. I'm on the ridge overlooking it. Grant, the facility is lit up. There are vehicles, people moving around. Something's happening. I'm on my way. Grant drove faster than he should have, gravel roads flying beneath his tires. He found Ava's car parked on a hill about half a mile from the relay station. She was standing outside with binoculars. Look, she said, handing them to him. Through the binoculars, Grant could see the facility clearly. Lights were on in the main building. Several SUVs and a large truck were parked inside the fence. People in dark uniforms moved with purpose between buildings. And the radio tower was active. He could see lights running up its length, and the dishes at the top were rotating, tracking something. They're broadcasting, Ava said. I can pick up the signal on multiple frequencies. She turned on a portable radio. The same drone Grant had heard before filled the air, but it was different now. More complex, with layers and harmonics that hadn't been there before. It's like they're transmitting and receiving, Ava continued. Like they're in communication with something. As they watched, every light on the facility went out simultaneously. Total darkness. Then, from the north, a light appeared in the sky. Grant's breath caught. It was moving toward the facility, descending as it approached. Not 3 lights this time. Just one, but larger, brighter. It stopped directly above the radio tower, hovering maybe 300 feet up. The tower's dishes tilted upward, pointing at the light. The light pulsed once, twice. The tower's dishes pulsed in response, lights running up and down the structure. They were communicating. Ava was recording on her phone, her hands shaking. Grant, this is it. This is proof. They're not natural phenomena. They're intelligent, and we're in contact with them. The light held its position for maybe 5 minutes. Then it began to rise, climbing slowly, steadily. When it reached perhaps 1,000 feet, it stopped again, and then it split. One light became 3, then 5, then 10. A constellation of lights arranged in a pattern Grant couldn't quite comprehend. They held that formation for several seconds. Then, all at once, they shot upward and vanished, faster than anything Grant had ever seen. The facility's lights came back on. The tower went dormant. Everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Except Grant and Ava had seen it, had recorded it. They sat in stunned silence for a long moment. "What do we do with this?" Ava finally asked. "We share it," Grant said, "with everyone. Let people decide for themselves what it means." And they did. The video went viral within hours. Millions of views, thousands of comments. News outlets around the world picked up the story. The government issued statements. Scientists offered explanations. Skeptics called it a hoax. But Grant knew what he'd seen, what they'd all seen. We weren't alone. We'd never been alone, and whatever was out there, in the skies above Kansas and beyond, they'd been watching us for a long time, trying to communicate in ways we were only beginning to understand. They came back. Don't look. But it was too late. Everyone was looking now, and nothing would ever be the same. Grant drove home that night, exhausted but unable to sleep. He sat on his back porch, watching the sky, thinking about Project Sentinel and electromagnetic phenomena and lights that split apart and reformed. His phone buzzed one last time. A text from the unknown number that had been threatening him. "You should have listened." Grant stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "No. You should have told us the truth." He never got a response. But 3 days later, the relay station was abandoned again. The vehicles gone, the lights off, the personnel vanished. Meridian Solutions released a statement saying they were ceasing operations at that location. The government announced Project Sentinel would be declassified, its files released to the public. And life went on, but different, changed. Grant still worked his county road patrol, still drove those same dark roads at night. But now, when he looked up at the stars, he did so with knowledge and wonder instead of casual indifference. We weren't alone, and somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between worlds, they were still watching, still waiting, still trying to speak to us in their own incomprehensible language. Grant Pollard, county road supervisor, had become part of something larger than himself. Part of humanity's first stumbling steps toward understanding that the universe was far stranger, far more populated, far more wondrous than we'd ever imagined. And it all started with a GPS failure and 3 lights in a triangle, hovering over a Kansas wheat field on a September night. Aaron Massey had been flying the same route for 6 years. Wichita to Hays, Kansas, 3 times a week, carrying mail and small packages in her Cessna 172. She knew every landmark, every radio tower, every lit farmhouse between the 2 cities. She could fly it in her sleep. But on the night of October 12, 2022, something appeared in her route that had never been there before. Erin took off from Wichita Eisenhower National at 9:47 p.m. Late departure, but the mail had been delayed, and the contract required same-day delivery. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, light winds, visibility unlimited. A pilot's dream for a night flight. She climbed to her cruising altitude of 5,500 feet and settled in for the 90-minute flight. The Cessna hummed steadily beneath her, instruments all reading normal. Below, the lights of small towns and isolated farms created constellations against the dark Kansas prairie. Erin was 42 minutes into the flight, approaching the halfway point when she first saw it. A light, dead ahead, maybe 20 miles out, right on her flight path. At first, she thought it was another aircraft, but the light was wrong. Too steady, too yellow, and it wasn't moving. Erin checked her instruments. Altitude 5,500 feet. Heading 395 degrees. Airspeed 115 knots. Everything normal. She looked back at the light. Still there, still stationary. Still that peculiar yellow color, like old street lights, not the white or red of aircraft navigation lights. She picked up her radio mic. Wichita Center, November 728 Delta. I'm showing traffic ahead, approximately 20 miles. Do you have anyone on radar? November 8 Delta, negative. No traffic in your vicinity, skies are clear. Erin frowned. If there was an aircraft out there, it should be on radar, unless it was flying without a transponder, which would be illegal at night. Center, I have a visual on what appears to be a stationary light at my 12 o'clock. Can you confirm? A pause. November 8 Delta. We're not showing anything. Could be a tower light or ground reflection. But Erin knew every tower on this route, and ground lights didn't hang in the sky at her altitude. She flew closer. The light didn't move, didn't blink, didn't change intensity. It just existed. A fixed point of yellow light suspended in the night sky. At 10 miles out, Erin's unease turned to genuine concern. The light was directly in her flight path, and it still wasn't moving. No aircraft could hover like that. Nothing could. She deviated slightly, moving 5 degrees to the north to give whatever it was a wide berth. Better safe than sorry. But as she changed her heading, the light seemed to shift too. Not obviously, not dramatically, but enough that it remained centered in her windscreen. Erin's hands tightened on the yoke. That wasn't possible. She'd definitely changed course. The light should have moved relative to her position. She turned another 5 degrees north. The light stayed centered. Okay, she muttered to herself. Okay, this is officially weird. She tried the radio again. Wichita Center, November 8 Delta. That light is still ahead of me, and it appears to be tracking my position. Request guidance. November 8 Delta. We're still not showing anything on radar. Are you experiencing any equipment malfunction? Erin scanned her instruments. Everything looked normal. Heading, altitude, speed, all as expected. Negative, Center. All systems normal. November 8 Delta. Continue on course. Keep us informed of any changes. Continue on course, toward that thing. Erin didn't love that idea, but she also didn't have much choice. Hays Regional Airport was ahead, and she had a schedule to keep. She flew on, closing the distance. 5 miles. 4. 3. At 2 miles, she could finally see details. The light wasn't a single point. It was a cluster of smaller lights, all that same yellow color, arranged in, she couldn't quite make out the pattern. Circular, spherical. It was hard to judge distance and size in the dark. 1 mile. The lights were getting bigger but still not moving. Erin's altitude was unchanged, 5,500 feet. Whatever this was, it was at her exact altitude. Half a mile. That's when Erin's engine coughed. Just once, a brief hiccup, but enough to make her heart skip. She immediately checked her instruments. Oil pressure good, fuel flow good, RPM steady at 2,400, temperature in the green. The engine ran smoothly, as if nothing had happened, but the lights were now close enough that Erin could see them clearly. Not a cluster. A formation. 7 lights, she counted, arranged in a perfect circle, rotating slowly clockwise, and in the center, darkness. Not empty space. Something darker than the night sky, something solid. Erin's radio crackled with heavy static. She tried to transmit, but got only noise in response. She was alone up here, approaching something that shouldn't exist, with no way to communicate. The logical part of her brain said to turn around, to divert to one of the smaller airports south of her position, to get on the ground immediately. But another part, the part that had been flying for 15 years and had seen her share of strange things in the sky, said to maintain course, to document, to witness. She continued forward. 1/4 mile. The lights stopped rotating. All 7 fixed in place, perfectly still, and Erin realized they were pointed at her. She could feel it, that sensation of being watched, being tracked, being evaluated. Her engine coughed again. This time, twice in succession. The RPM needle dipped, recovered, dipped again. No, 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 Erin whispered, her hand moving to the carburetor heat control. But the temperature was fine. No indication of icing, no reason for the engine to hesitate. The lights flared brighter. So bright, Erin had to squint, had to look away. The interior of her cockpit was illuminated like daylight. Every shadow banished, every gauge and switch visible in harsh yellow light. Then, silence. The engine had stopped. Not failed. Not seized. Just stopped. No noise, no vibration, no warning. The propeller continued to windmill in the slipstream, but without power, without thrust. Erin's training took over. She pushed the nose down to maintain airspeed, started the emergency restart checklist. Fuel valve, on. Mixture, rich. Magnetos, both. Throttle, forward, nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. The engine was completely dead. Below her, the Kansas prairie stretched dark and featureless. She was gliding now, losing altitude, with maybe 5 minutes before she'd be forced to attempt an emergency landing in a field she couldn't see. The lights moved. They broke formation, spreading out, surrounding her aircraft. 3 in front, 2 on each side. Moving with her as she descended, matching her glide speed exactly. Erin reached for her phone. If she was going down, she wanted documentation, wanted proof. Her hand shook as she activated the camera, pointed it at the lights ahead. The phone's screen went blank. Not off. Blank. A pure white screen with no icons, no controls, nothing. Just white. Then words appeared, black text on white background, as if someone was typing, activated. Erin stared at the screen. What the hell did that mean? Activated? What was activated? The lights pulled away, climbing rapidly. Within seconds they were gone, vanished into the darkness above. And her engine roared back to life. The sudden noise made Erin jump. The propeller caught, RPM climbed to normal, all gauges reading green. As if nothing had happened. As if the engine had never stopped. She grabbed the yoke with both hands, leveled out at 4,200 feet, her heart hammering. Her radio crackled back to life. Bear 8 Delta, do you copy? November 8 Delta, Wichita Center, respond. Aaron keyed the mic with a trembling hand. Wichita Center, November 8 Delta. I'm here. I had an engine failure, but it restarted. I'm level at 4200. November 8 Delta, say your position. Aaron checked her GPS. The display was working normally now, showing her position 15 miles southwest of Hayes. Center, I'm 15 southwest of Hayes, continuing to destination. November 8 Delta. Do you require emergency services? Did she? Her engine was running perfectly, all systems normal, except for whatever the hell had just happened. Negative, Center. Engine is operating normally, continuing to Hayes. Roger. November 8 Delta. Contact Hayes Tower on 118.3. Aaron switched frequencies and contacted the tower. They cleared her for a straight-in approach to runway 18. She descended on a standard pattern, constantly checking her engine instruments, waiting for another failure that didn't come. On the ground, waiting by his pickup truck near the small terminal building, was Tommy Greer. He was Aaron's ground contact in Hayes, the guy who picked up her deliveries and distributed them to the local businesses. He'd been doing it almost as long as Aaron had been flying this route. But tonight, Tommy's truck was pointed toward the runway, headlights aimed at the sky. And those headlights were wrong. Aaron could see them from 2 miles out. They weren't the normal bright white of modern LED headlights. They were pulsing, expanding and contracting in a circular pattern, like a heartbeat made of light. She keyed her radio to the tower. Hayes Tower, November 8 Delta. I'm seeing unusual lighting at the field. Ground vehicle with pulsing headlights near the terminal. November 8 Delta. We're not showing anything unusual on our cameras. Ground traffic is normal. But Aaron could see it clearly. Tommy's truck, headlights doing something no headlights should do, expanding into perfect circles of light, then contracting to pinpoints, then expanding again. She continued her approach, too committed now to go around. Landing gear down, flaps to full, airspeed 70 knots over the threshold. The wheels touched smoothly. Aaron rolled out, turned off the runway, and taxied to the transient parking area. As she shut down the engine and completed her post-flight checks, she kept glancing at Tommy's truck. The headlights were normal now, steady, white, as they should be. Aaron sat in the cockpit for a long moment, trying to process what had happened. The lights, the engine failure, her phone's screen, Tommy's headlights, her phone. She pulled it from her pocket. The screen was normal, showing her lock screen. She unlocked it and opened the camera app. It had saved one photo, time-stamped 10:39 p.m., exactly when she'd tried to photograph those lights. Aaron opened the image. Empty sky, just darkness and a few stars. No lights, no evidence of anything unusual, except for text in the lower left corner. White letters that shouldn't be there, couldn't be there. Activated. Aaron's hands were shaking again. She saved a screenshot of the photo, then another backup to her cloud storage. Evidence, proof, whatever that was worth. She climbed out of the plane and was doing her walk-around inspection when Tommy approached. "Aaron, you okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Tommy was 63, a retired mechanic who'd lived in Hayes his whole life. Solid, practical, not prone to flights of fancy. "Tommy, did you notice anything weird tonight? With your truck? Your headlights?" He frowned. "My headlights? No. Why?" "When I was on approach, they looked, I don't know, distorted, pulsing." Tommy walked back to his truck and turned the lights on and off. Normal. They're working fine. Maybe atmospheric distortion. You were looking through a lot of air. Maybe. But Aaron knew what she'd seen. She helped Tommy load the mail into his truck, going through the familiar routine, trying to pretend everything was normal. But her mind kept returning to those lights, to that moment of impossible silence when her engine died, to that word on her phone, Activated. Tommy, you ever see strange things in the sky around here? He paused, a mailbag in his hands. Strange how? Lights, things that don't move like planes, things that, I don't know, don't make sense. Tommy set the bag down slowly. Why do you ask? Because I saw something tonight, on my approach. Lights that tracked my aircraft, that surrounded me, and my engine failed, Tommy. Completely dead. No reason, no warning. Then it just started again. Tommy's expression changed. How many lights? 7. In a circle, rotating. He was quiet for a long moment. Come with me. There's something you need to see. They got in his truck and drove east, away from the airport. After about 10 miles on County Road 40, Tommy turned onto a dirt road that led into farmland. He drove for another mile, then stopped. Look, he said, pointing at a wheat field. Erin got out. At first, she didn't see anything unusual, just stubble from the harvested wheat, pale in the moonlight. Then Tommy handed her a flashlight. Walk about 50 yards in, straight from here. Erin walked into the field, flashlight beam sweeping back and forth, and then she saw it. A circle, maybe 30 feet in diameter. Within the circle, the wheat stubble was different. Not burned, not crushed, but altered somehow. The stalks were bent at perfect 90-degree angles, all pointing toward the center, creating a spiral pattern. When did this appear? Erin asked. 3 nights ago. I was driving home late, saw lights over this field. Same description you just gave me. 7 lights in a circle, rotating. They were there maybe 2 minutes, then they shot straight up and disappeared. Next morning, I came out here and found this. Erin walked to the center of the spiral. The ground was hard, undisturbed. No footprints, no vehicle tracks. Just the altered wheat stubble in its perfect geometric pattern. Did you report it? She asked. To who? The police? They'd think I was drunk. The Air Force? They'd tell me to stop watching sci-fi movies. Tommy stood at the edge of the circle. But it's real, Erin. Whatever you saw tonight, whatever made this pattern, it's real. And it's been showing up around here for weeks. Weeks? How many times? This is the 4th formation I've found. Others have seen them too, but most people don't want to talk about it. Don't want to be labeled crazy. Erin pulled out her phone and photographed the formation from multiple angles. Real, documented evidence. But even as she took the pictures, she wondered if they'd show anything. If whatever technology could make her camera display activated could also manipulate what images it recorded. They drove back to the airport in silence. Erin's mind was racing, trying to fit the pieces together. The lights, the engine failure, her phone, the crop formation. They were connected, had to be. But how and why? You staying in town tonight? Tommy asked as they pulled up to the terminal. Yeah, I've got a room at the Hampton. Early departure tomorrow morning. Be careful driving. Keep your eyes on the road, not the sky. Erin smiled weakly. I'll try. But as she drove to the hotel, she couldn't help but watch the sky, looking for those lights, looking for proof that she hadn't imagined the whole thing. The hotel room was generic and comfortable. Erin took a long shower, trying to wash away the adrenaline and fear. But when she got out, wrapped in the hotel's terry cloth robe, she found her phone sitting on the bed where she'd left it. The screen was on, active, showing the camera app. Erin's blood ran cold. She hadn't touched it, hadn't even been in the room. The camera was pointed at the window, at the night sky visible beyond the curtains. Erin slowly approached the phone, half expecting it to do something impossible. But it just sat there, camera running, recording whatever was outside. She picked it up and looked at the screen. The view through the window, the parking lot, the dark fields beyond. Nothing unusual. But in the corner of the screen, that text had appeared again. Activated. Erin's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She forced herself to breathe, to think clearly. Someone, something, had accessed her phone remotely, had turned on the camera, was watching. But watching for what? She closed the camera app and opened her settings, trying to disable location services, trying to turn off everything that could transmit data. But every time she changed a setting, it reverted automatically. Her phone was no longer under her control. Erin set it face down on the nightstand and backed away. She thought about throwing it out the window, destroying it, getting rid of whatever surveillance was happening. But she needed it. For navigation, for communication, for her job. Instead, she wrapped it in a towel and put it in the bathroom, closing the door. Out of sight, at least. She climbed into bed and tried to sleep, but every noise made her jump. Every shadow seemed to move, and somewhere out there in the Kansas night, those lights were still active, still watching, still waiting. For what? The last thing Erin remembered before finally drifting off was Tommy's warning. Keep your eyes on the road, not the sky. But it was too late for that. Whatever was happening, she was part of it now. Had been since the moment those lights appeared in her flight path, and something told her it was only beginning. Erin woke at 5:47 a.m. to find her phone on the pillow next to her head. She sat up so fast she got dizzy. The phone was definitely there, screen facing up, still wrapped in the towel she'd left it in, except now it was in her bed, inches from her face. She hadn't gotten up during the night. Hadn't sleepwalked, had she? Erin grabbed the phone gingerly, as if it might bite. The screen lit up at her touch. 6:02 a.m. Wait, no, 5:48 a.m. The time was wrong, jumping forward and backward. And there, in her notifications, was a calendar event she hadn't created. Runway 36, 7 o'clock a.m. Don't be late. Runway 36, the northbound runway at Hayes Regional. But her departure was scheduled for 8:30, not 7 o'clock. And she always used runway 18, southbound toward Wichita. Erin deleted the notification. It reappeared immediately. She tried again. Same result. Her phone wanted her at runway 36 at 7 o'clock a.m. Erin sat on the edge of the bed trying to think logically. This was insane. Phones didn't move themselves, didn't create appointments, didn't refuse to let you delete things, unless someone was remotely accessing her device. But that would require sophisticated hacking, the kind governments used, not random pranksters. She checked her email, looking for any explanation, any clue. Nothing. Just routine messages and spam. A text appeared from Tommy. You awake? Need to show you something. Can you meet at the field off County Road 40? The one from last night. Erin replied, when? Now, it's urgent. She dressed quickly and drove to the location, the sun just beginning to lighten the eastern horizon. Tommy's truck was already there, parked on the shoulder. He was standing in the wheat field at the edge of the circular formation they'd seen last night. But something was different. The spiral was glowing. Not brightly, just a faint luminescence like foxfire or bioluminescence, outlining each bent stalk. In the pre-dawn darkness, it created an ethereal pattern, a mandala of soft light. It started about 30 minutes ago, Tommy said as Erin approached. I couldn't sleep, so I drove out here to check on it. And I saw this. Erin walked around the edge of the formation. The glow was uniform, consistent, following the spiral pattern exactly. She pulled out her phone to photograph it. The camera wouldn't work. Every time she tried to take a picture, the app crashed, and returned her to the home screen, where that calendar notification was waiting. Runway 36, 7 a.m., don't be late. Tommy, look at this. She showed him the notification. He read it and frowned. Did you schedule a flight on runway 36? No, and I can't delete it. Every time I try, it comes back. That's the same thing that happened to my truck last night. What do you mean? Tommy pulled out his own phone and showed her his GPS app. A route was plotted, but not to anywhere Tommy would normally go. The destination was set for coordinates that appeared to be in the middle of empty farmland about 15 miles northwest of Hayes. I didn't enter this, Tommy said. It just appeared this morning, and when I try to delete it, it resets. Aaron felt a chill despite the warming air. They're directing us, giving us instructions. They? Whatever made these formations, whatever I saw in the sky last night. Tommy looked at the glowing spiral. What do you think they want? I don't know, but I think we're going to find out at 7 a.m. They drove back to the airport together, Tommy following in his truck. Erin's hands were tight on the wheel, her mind running through possibilities. None of them good. At the airport, everything looked normal. The small terminal was open, a few early morning travelers checking in for the first commercial flight of the day. Erin's Cessna sat where she'd left it, looking perfectly ordinary in the growing light. She did a thorough pre-flight inspection, checking for any tampering, any signs that something had been done to her aircraft overnight. Everything checked out. Fuel, oil, control surfaces, all normal. At 6:50 a.m., Erin climbed into the cockpit. Tommy stood nearby, watching. You sure about this? He called up to her. No, but I think if I don't show up, they'll just keep escalating. She started the engine. It caught immediately, running smoothly. She taxied to runway 36, the northbound runway she never used. The tower cleared her for departure. November 8 Delta, you're cleared for takeoff runway 36. Northbound departure approved. Erin took a breath and pushed the throttle forward. The Cessna accelerated, lifted off smoothly, climbed into the brightening sky. At 500 feet, her phone chimed. She glanced at it, secured in the mount on her yoke. A new message from no sender. Maintain heading 350. Climb to 7,500. Erin looked at her compass. She was heading 360, due north. The message wanted her to turn slightly northwest. She thought about ignoring it, about turning around, landing, getting on the ground and calling, who? The police? The FAA? What would she even tell them? Instead, she turned to heading 350. The landscape below was classic Kansas. Section roads dividing farmland into neat squares, isolated farmhouses, the occasional town. At 7,500 feet, she could see for 50 miles in every direction, and directly ahead, maybe 20 miles out, was a light. Not 7 lights this time, just one, stationary. That same yellow color she'd seen last night. Her phone chimed again. Approach at current altitude. Do not deviate. Erin's mouth was dry. Every instinct told her to turn around. But she flew on, closing the distance. 10 miles. The light was brighter now, more defined. Still not moving. 5 miles. She could see it was at her altitude, maybe slightly above. Hovering. Impossible but real. 2 miles. Her engine was running perfectly. No coughing, no hesitation. But Erin's hand stayed near the throttle, ready. 1 mile. The light was large now, maybe the size of a small car. Perfectly round, glowing with that yellow luminescence, and behind it, she could just make out a darker shape. Something solid. Something real. Her phone displayed new text. Maintain airspeed. Do not accelerate or decelerate. Erin obeyed, though her hands shook on the yoke. She was committed now, whatever happened. 1/2 mile. The object was massive. Disc-shaped, she realized, maybe 60 feet in diameter. The yellow light emanated from its underside, but the upper surface was dark, almost absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Quarter mile. Her radio erupted with static, then a voice. Not Wichita Center. Not Hayes Tower. Something else. The voice wasn't speaking English, wasn't speaking any language Erin recognized, but somehow, impossibly, she understood it. You are recognized. You are cleared. Proceed. Cleared for what? Her aircraft's nose dipped slightly without her input. The yoke pulled gently forward, overriding her control. The Cessna descended, approaching the object from above. Erin didn't fight it, couldn't fight it. Whatever force was controlling her aircraft was far stronger than her. As she got closer, she could see details on the object's surface. Panels, seams, markings that might have been text in some unknown script. And underneath, in the center, where the yellow light originated, an opening was forming. A rectangular portal, maybe 15 feet wide, perfectly sized for her aircraft. No, Erin thought. No, no, no. I'm not flying into that thing. But her hands had no control. The Cessna descended steadily, approaching the opening. The yellow light surrounded her, filled the cockpit, washed out all other color. Erin closed her eyes, certain this was the end. Certain she'd made a terrible mistake by following those instructions. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The yellow light vanished. Control returned to the yoke. The opening in the object closed. And the object shot straight up, so fast it vanished almost instantly, leaving nothing but clear morning sky. Erin leveled out at 7,200 feet. She'd descended nearly 300 feet during that, whatever that was. Her engine was running normally. Her instruments showed nothing unusual. Her radio was clear. She checked her phone. The messages were gone. The calendar notification was gone. Everything was back to normal, except for one new photo in her camera roll. Erin opened it, her hands still shaking. The photo was taken from her aircraft's perspective, looking up at the underside of that disc-shaped object. Crystal clear, well lit, unmistakable. And in the metadata, where the location should be listed, were coordinates. Coordinates that matched the destination Tommy's GPS had shown this morning. Whatever had just happened, they wanted her to go there, to see something, to understand something. Erin turned northwest, following the coordinates. The location was in the middle of nowhere. No towns, no major roads, just farmland and prairie. But as she approached, circling at 5,000 feet, she saw something that shouldn't be there. A facility, maybe 10 buildings arranged in a rough circle, connected by paved roads. In the center, a large dish antenna pointed at the sky, and surrounding everything, a high fence topped with razor wire. No markings, no signs, just anonymous white buildings and that massive antenna. Erin photographed it from multiple angles, then turned back toward Hayes. She needed to land, needed to talk to Tommy, needed to figure out what this all meant. But as she descended on approach to runway 18, her normal runway this time, she saw vehicles surrounding the terminal, black SUVs, too many of them, and people in dark suits talking to airport personnel. Her radio crackled. November 8 Delta, changed to frequency 121.195 immediately. That wasn't Hayes Tower. That wasn't any frequency she recognized. Say again? Erin asked. November 8 Delta, this is Federal Authority. Change to 121.95 and land immediately. We need to speak with you. Federal Authority. They knew. They'd been watching. They were waiting. Erin made a split-second decision. She pushed the throttle forward and climbed, turning away from Hayes. November 8 Delta, you are ordered to land. Failure to comply will result in interception. Interception. They'd send jets. F-16s from the Air National Guard base, probably. She couldn't outrun them, couldn't outmaneuver them, but she could go somewhere they wouldn't expect. Erin turned southeast, toward the small municipal airport in Russell, Kansas. It was 40 miles away, barely a strip with minimal facilities. She radioed ahead, declaring an emergency. Engine trouble, needed immediate landing. Russell cleared her for straight-in approach. She descended fast, probably too fast, but she needed to be on the ground before those SUVs or jets or whoever caught up. The wheels touched hard. Erin taxied to the small parking area and shut down immediately. She grabbed her phone, her flight bag, and ran toward the road. A car was pulling up, Tommy's truck. "Get in," he shouted. Erin didn't ask questions. She jumped in, and Tommy accelerated away from the airport. "How did you know?" she asked. "Your phone. It sent me your location and a message. Pick me up. Russell Airport, now." "I didn't send that message, but I figured you needed help." They drove east, staying off main highways, using farm roads and county routes. After about 20 miles, Tommy pulled into an old barn on abandoned property. "We'll wait here," he said. "Let things cool down." Erin was shaking, adrenaline and fear catching up with her. "Tommy, they're after me. Federal agents, because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." "The facility? Yeah, it's real. It's massive. And they don't want anyone knowing it exists." Tommy pulled out his phone and showed Erin something he'd been researching. News articles, blog posts, conspiracy theory websites, all talking about a classified military installation in northwest Kansas. One that officially didn't exist, but that locals had been whispering about for decades. "They call it the Array," Tommy said. "Supposedly, it's for monitoring satellite communications. But people who've gotten too close report the same things you experienced. Lights in the sky, equipment malfunctions, missing time." "Missing time? Yeah. People drive past that area and lose an hour, 2 hours. No memory of it, just gone." Erin checked her watch. It was 11:35 a.m., but that didn't make sense. She'd taken off from Hayes at 7 o'clock. The encounter had lasted maybe 15 minutes. The flight to Russell another 20. It should be around 8 o'clock, maybe 9 o'clock at the latest. 4 hours were missing. She checked her phone's timeline. There were photos there she didn't remember taking. Images of the facility from angles she hadn't flown. Close-ups of the buildings showing details impossible to capture from 5,000 feet. And a video, 32 minutes long. Erin's hands were trembling as she opened it. The video showed her cockpit, filmed from a perspective that seemed to be floating just above and behind her seat. She watched herself flying, approaching that disc-shaped object, descending toward it. Then the video showed what her closed eyes hadn't seen. Her aircraft had entered that opening, had been inside the object. The interior was vast, impossibly large given the object's external dimensions. Curved walls covered with those strange panels and markings, and in the center, suspended in midair, was a sphere of pure light. The video showed her, Erin, watching herself in the video, reaching toward that sphere, touching it. And in that moment of contact, her expression changed. Her eyes went distant, unfocused, as if she was seeing or understanding something profound. The video cut to black. When it resumed, her aircraft was descending away from the object and everything happened exactly as Erin remembered. The object closing, shooting upward, disappearing. But those 32 minutes in between, minutes she had no memory of, were documented in that impossible video. Erin, Tommy said quietly. "What did they do to you?" "I don't know. I don't remember." But even as she said it, she felt something different inside her. A new awareness. A sense of connection, knowledge. She couldn't define it. Her phone chimed. Not a message this time, a phone call, from a blocked number. Against her better judgment, Aaron answered. "Miss Massey." The voice was male, professional, calm. "I'm calling to inform you that what you experience today is classified information under federal law. Discussing it with anyone, sharing any photos or videos, or attempting to return to that location will result in serious legal consequences. Who is this?" "Someone trying to help you understand the situation. You witnessed something extraordinary. Something that has implications far beyond what you can imagine. We need to debrief you, collect your device, and ensure you understand the importance of confidentiality. And if I refuse..." A pause. "That would be unfortunate for everyone involved." The call ended. Aaron looked at Tommy. "They want my phone. They want to erase the evidence. Then we back it up, we share it. We make sure enough people see it that they can't contain it. That'll ruin my life, Tommy. I'll lose my pilot's license, maybe face criminal charges. Or you stay silent, let them take your phone, and spend the rest of your life wondering what really happened to you in those missing minutes." Aaron thought about that sphere of light. About touching it. About the sense she now had of something vast and complex waiting just beyond normal perception. About the word that had appeared on her phone. Activated. What had been activated? Her phone? Her camera? Or something else? Something inside her? She made her decision. "Let's upload everything. Every photo, every video, every piece of evidence. We'll send it everywhere. News outlets, UFO researchers, social media. Make it too widespread to suppress." Tommy nodded grimly. "You sure? There's no going back from this." "I'm sure. Because whatever's happening, people deserve to know. They deserve to understand that we're not alone. That there are things in the sky above Kansas that shouldn't be there. And that someone, some organization, has been keeping it secret." They spent the next 2 hours in that barn, uploading files, writing descriptions, sending emails. The video of those missing 32 minutes went to a dozen different recipients. The photos of the facility went to investigative journalists. The images of the disc-shaped object went viral on social media within minutes. By the time federal agents tracked them to that barn, it was too late. The evidence was everywhere, copies distributed too widely to ever fully contain. But the agents didn't seem angry. If anything, they seemed resigned. "Miss Massey, Mr. Greer, you've made things very complicated," the lead agent said. He was middle-aged, gray hair, tired eyes. "We're going to need you to come with us." "Are we under arrest?" Aaron asked. "No, but we need to talk about what you experienced, and we need to help you understand what you've done." They were taken to a nondescript office building in Wichita. Not military, not obviously government. Just anonymous offices with no identifying marks. In a conference room, they met with a team of people who introduced themselves with first names only. Scientists, military personnel, intelligence analysts, all treating the situation with a strange mix of annoyance and respect. "You saw something real," one of the scientists said. She was maybe 50, with sharp features and tired eyes. "The array is real. The objects are real. We've been monitoring them for 73 years. "Monitoring," Aaron said, "or communicating?" The scientist smiled slightly. "Both. Miss Massey, what you experienced wasn't an accident. You were selected. The objects, we call them observers, have been studying specific individuals for decades. Pilots, scientists, people with particular skills or attributes. You're one of them. Selected for what? We don't know exactly, but we know it changes people, activates something, enhances perception, intuition, understanding. You're going to start noticing things others don't. Patterns, connections, possibilities. Aaron thought about that word. Activated. What am I supposed to do with this activation? That's up to you. Some people use it to advance science, solve problems, create things. Others try to ignore it, go back to normal life. But it never really goes away. You're different now, Ms. Massey. Part of something larger. Over the next several hours, they explained what they could. The array was both a monitoring station and a communication hub, trying to understand and occasionally interact with the observers. The government had been tracking these objects since the 1940s, trying to understand their purpose, their origin, their intent. Are they extraterrestrial? Tommy asked. We don't know, maybe, or maybe they're from elsewhere. Another dimension, another time. We don't have enough data to say definitively. When they were finally released, with warnings about national security and promises of ongoing consultation, Aaron and Tommy stood in the parking lot, trying to process everything. You believe them? Tommy asked. I don't know. But I believe what I experienced. I believe in those missing 32 minutes. I believe I'm different now. She looked at her phone, returned to her, but with all the files supposedly deleted. And I believe they can't stop what we started. Too many people have seen the evidence now. What are you going to do? Aaron looked up at the sky, now dark with evening. Stars were appearing one by one, and somewhere up there she could feel them. The observers. Watching. Waiting. I'm going to keep flying, she said, because I think this is just the beginning. 3 weeks later, Aaron was back in the cockpit, flying her regular route from Wichita to Hays, but everything had changed. The story had exploded across the internet. Despite the government's attempts at damage control, the videos and photos Aaron and Tommy had uploaded were downloaded, shared, and analyzed by millions. UFO researchers called it the most credible evidence ever presented. Skeptics claimed it was an elaborate hoax. News organizations couldn't decide which narrative to follow. But Aaron knew the truth. She carried it with her every time she flew, every time she looked up at the sky. The activation was real. She could feel it now, a constant, low-level awareness that hadn't been there before. She noticed patterns in weather systems that helped her predict turbulence hours in advance. She could sense equipment problems before instruments showed them. Her navigation skills had become almost supernatural. She could feel the correct heading, the optimal altitude, as if the air itself was guiding her. Other pilots were experiencing similar phenomena. The videos had inspired dozens of other aviators to come forward with their own stories. UFO encounters, missing time, impossible maneuvers. A pattern was emerging, one that had been there all along but hidden, ignored, dismissed. The government had quietly changed its position. No more denials. Instead, they'd announced the formation of a task force to study unidentified aerial phenomena and their effects on technology and human cognition. The array was officially acknowledged, though its true purpose remained classified. Aaron had been contacted by the task force. They wanted her to participate in studies to help them understand what happened during those missing 32 minutes. She'd agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly because she wanted answers. But tonight, on this routine flight from Wichita to Hays, Aaron wasn't thinking about government studies or media attention. She was thinking about the dreams. Every night since the activation, she'd been having the same dream. She was flying, but not in her Cessna. She was flying without an aircraft, just herself moving through the sky. and she was heading somewhere specific, somewhere important. But she always woke before arriving. Tonight, at 9:30 p.m., 40 minutes into her flight, something changed. That feeling of awareness she'd carried since the activation suddenly intensified. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had turned up the volume on a radio. Erin could feel them. The observers. Multiple contacts, maybe a dozen, spread across a 50-mile radius. All active, all communicating, and all focused on what? Her? This area? Something else? Her phone, a new one, since the old one was now in federal custody, chimed. A message from Tommy. "You feel that? Something's different tonight." Erin texted back one-handed while maintaining her heading. "Yes, multiple contacts. What's happening? Don't know, but others are reporting it too. There's a group chat, pilots who had experiences. Everyone's sensing something." Erin checked her GPS. She was approaching that same area where she'd encountered the disc-shaped observer 3 weeks ago. The area where the array was located. And dead ahead, climbing up from the horizon, was a light. Not yellow this time. Blue-white. Brilliant. Rising steadily into the night sky. Erin's radio crackled. "Attention, all aircraft, this is Wichita Center. We're tracking multiple unidentified objects in the vicinity of Ellis County. All aircraft are advised to maintain safe separation and report any sightings." Multiple objects. Not just one. Erin looked around her cockpit. Through her windscreen she could see them now. Lights appearing in the sky like stars waking up. 5, 10, 20. All different colors. Red, blue, green, yellow, orange, spread across the horizon. And they were moving. Not randomly. In formation, choreographed. Like a dance performed on a cosmic stage. Her phone displayed a message. Not from Tommy this time. From no sender. Witness. Document. Understand. Erin activated her phone's camera and mounted it to record the view ahead. Then she just flew, watching, her hands steady on the yoke, as the sky above Kansas filled with impossible light. The objects moved in patterns that reminded her of murmuration, the way flocks of starbirds move in perfect coordination. But these weren't birds. They were something else. Something vast and ancient and incomprehensibly intelligent, and they wanted to be seen. November 8 Delta, Wichita Center. Are you observing the objects? Erin keyed her mic. Affirmative, Center. Multiple objects, various colors, moving in formation patterns. They appeared to be... She paused, searching for the right word. They appear to be performing. Performing? Like a display. Like they're showing us something. For the next 20 minutes, Erin flew through a sky transformed. The objects moved around her aircraft, never threatening, never approaching too close. Just present, just visible, making their existence undeniable. Other aircraft reported the same thing. Commercial jets, private planes, even military aircraft. Everyone saw them. Everyone recorded them. And on the ground, Tommy and hundreds of others stood in fields and parking lots and streets, phones out, cameras rolling, documenting what would later be called the Kansas display, the largest mass UFO sighting in recorded history. When it ended suddenly. All the objects, as if responding to a silent signal, climbed straight up in perfect unison. Within seconds they were gone, leaving nothing but normal stars and a sky full of questions. Erin landed at Hayes in a daze, her mind still processing what she'd witnessed. The terminal was crowded with people who'd driven to the airport to watch. Tommy was there, his face reflecting the same awe and confusion Erin felt. They wanted everyone to see, he said. That's what this was about. Not secrecy, not hiding. They wanted to be seen by as many people as possible. But why now? Aaron asked. Why tonight? The answer came from an unexpected source. A woman approached them, the scientist from the debriefing 3 weeks ago. She looked different now, less tired, almost excited. Because you opened the door, she said. When you shared those videos, when you refused to stay silent, you changed something. You showed them that we're ready. Ready to acknowledge them, ready to engage, ready to move forward. Ready for what? We don't know yet. But over the past 3 weeks, the observers have been more active than in the previous 70 years combined. More sightings, more encounters, more communication. It's accelerating. She pulled out a tablet and showed them a map. It was covered with pins, thousands of them, each representing a reported sighting in the past 3 weeks. The concentration was highest in the central United States, but there were reports from every continent. A global awakening, the scientist continued. That's what some are calling it. The observers aren't just showing themselves to individuals anymore. They're showing themselves to everyone, to humanity. Aaron looked at the map, at those thousands of pins, and understood. This wasn't just about her activation. It wasn't just about her experience. It was about a fundamental shift in how humanity understood its place in the universe. We weren't alone. We'd never been alone. And now, finally, we were being given proof. Over the next days and weeks, the world transformed. The Kansas display became the most documented UFO event in history. Thousands of videos all showing the same thing, intelligent objects performing coordinated maneuvers in the sky. Impossible to deny. Impossible to explain away. Governments around the world acknowledged what they'd been hiding for decades. Secret programs, monitoring stations, recovered materials, encounters with non-human intelligence. The dam broke, and decades of secrecy came flooding out. Erin found herself at the center of it all. The pilot who'd refused to stay silent. The witness who'd shared the truth. She gave interviews, testified before congressional committees, worked with scientists trying to understand the activation phenomenon. But her favorite moments were still in the cockpit. Flying her route from Wichita to Hays 3 times a week, watching the Kansas sky. Because the observers were still there. Not as obviously as during the display, but present. Visible to those who'd been activated. Visible to those who knew how to look. And Erin was learning to communicate back. It started with simple awareness, knowing when they were near, feeling their attention. But gradually, it evolved. She found she could broadcast, project, send out thoughts or intentions, and receive responses. Not words, not language, but understanding, connection. She wasn't alone in this. Other activated individuals reported similar abilities. They formed networks, shared experiences, tried to make sense of what was happening to them. One night, 6 months after her initial encounter, Erin was flying her usual route when she felt a familiar presence. One of the observers, the same one from that first night. She was certain of it somehow. She sent out a thought. Why me? Why was I chosen? The response came not as words, but as pure understanding flooding into her mind. You were willing to see, willing to acknowledge, willing to change. Not everyone is. What do you want from us? Evolution, growth, partnership. You are not alone in the universe. You never were. But you isolated yourselves through fear and denial. We've been waiting for you to be ready. Ready for what? To join, to expand, to become more than you are. The presence faded, but the understanding remained. Erin flew on through the night, processing what she'd learned. We were being invited, not invaded, not threatened. Invited to something larger. To expand our understanding, our capabilities, our place in the cosmos. And it had started here above the Kansas prairie, with one pilot who'd refused to look away when impossible lights appeared in her flight path. Aaron landed at Hayes and found Tommy waiting as always. But this time he had someone with him, a young woman, maybe 25, with bright eyes and a pilot's jacket. "Aaron, this is Sarah Mitchell. She had an encounter last week, same as yours. She's been activated." Aaron shook Sarah's hand and saw recognition in her eyes. Another person carrying that same awareness, that same connection. "I don't understand what's happening to me," Sarah said. "I keep feeling them, knowing things I shouldn't know, seeing patterns everywhere." "I know," Aaron said. "We all do, but it gets easier, and you're not alone." They talked for hours that night. 3 pilots, 3 witnesses, 3 people activated by something beyond human understanding. They shared experiences, compared notes, tried to make sense of it all. And as they talked, Aaron realized something profound. This was how it would spread. Not through government announcements or scientific papers, but through human connection, through witnesses helping witnesses, through people like her, helping people like Sarah understand what they'd become. The activation was contagious, not biologically, but through exposure, through openness, through willingness to acknowledge what others denied. More people were changing every day. More people were seeing. More people were understanding. Humanity was evolving. And Aaron Massey, small-town pilot carrying mail between Kansas cities, had been one of the first. 1 year after her initial encounter, Aaron stood at the array. She'd been invited, officially this time, not through mysterious phone messages. The facility was open now, at least to those who'd been activated. A research center, a meeting place, a bridge between human and other. She looked up at that massive dish antenna, now openly tracking the observers as they moved through the sky. No more secrecy, no more denial, just honest investigation into the biggest question humanity had ever faced. What comes next? Inside the main building, Aaron walked past laboratories where scientists analyzed recovered materials that defied known physics. Past conference rooms where activated individuals shared their experiences with government officials who finally listened. Past walls covered with maps showing activation clusters spreading across continents like ripples in a pond. She stopped at an observation deck overlooking the antenna array. Dr. Santos was there, the same scientist who'd debriefed her a year ago. But she looked different now. Younger, somehow, more vibrant. The activation affected everyone differently. "We're detecting communication patterns we never saw before," Santos said without preamble. "The observers are broadcasting more openly. Teaching, we think. Preparing us." For what? Contact. Real contact. Not just lights in the sky or missing time. Actual dialogue, exchange, partnership. Santos pulled up data on her tablet. "Look at this. Brain scans of activated individuals show new neural pathways forming. Connections that shouldn't be possible. You're literally evolving, Aaron. All of you." Aaron thought about the dreams, the enhanced perception, the ability to sense the observer's presence. What happens when everyone's activated? That's the question, isn't it? Santos smiled. "Some think it'll be gradual, taking generations. Others believe we're approaching a threshold, a tipping point where enough humans have changed that everything shifts. You have a theory. I think they're waiting for us to reach critical mass. Once enough of us can see them, can communicate with them, can understand what they're offering, then the real transformation begins." Aaron's phone chimed. Not a mysterious message this time, just a text from Tommy. Another formation spotted over Dodge City. 7 lights in a circle, just like yours. But there was a second message right after. Sarah says she can hear them now, not just feel them, actually hear their thoughts. Aaron, this is accelerating faster than we expected. Aaron felt a chill. Hearing them. That was new. That was beyond what she could do. The activation was progressing, deepening, spreading in ways they hadn't anticipated. She showed Santos the message. The scientist's eyes widened. If people are developing direct telepathic communication with the observers, we might be closer to that threshold than we thought. Aaron walked outside, needing air, needing space to process. The sun was setting over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful. Normal. Except nothing was normal anymore. She thought about her life a year ago. Simple, predictable. Flying the same route, following the same patterns. Never questioning what might exist beyond the ordinary. Now she was part of something vast. Something that had been waiting for humanity for longer than she could comprehend. The observers hadn't arrived recently. They'd always been here, watching, waiting for us to be ready to see them. And that night, a year ago, when those lights appeared in her flight path, when her engine failed and her phone displayed that single word, that had been her invitation, her doorway, her activation. She smiled. The pattern continued. The activation spread. The evolution accelerated. She typed back to Tommy. Tell them not to be afraid. Tell them to watch. Tell them to listen. Tell them we're not alone anymore. She looked up at the Kansas sky, at the stars emerging in the twilight. Somewhere up there, the observers watched, waited, guided. And somewhere in her phone's memory that single frame remained. Empty sky with one word in the corner. Activated. It was the truth. She'd been activated. Humanity was being activated. Changed. Expanded. Prepared for something vast and strange and wonderful. The route had stopped in the Kansas sky that night a year ago. Stopped and shown Aaron Massey something impossible. But it hadn't been an ending. It had been a beginning. And the journey was just starting.